Ethan Whitmore ripped the divorce decree out of his wife's hands and tore it in half across her chest. Then he grabbed her wrist, twisted it until her purse hit the marble floor, and hissed into her ear, "Freeze everything. Accounts cards, the apartment codes, today." Her cards scattered across the courthouse tile. Nobody moved. He straightened his jacket, smiled at the security guard, and said, "You've got $400 in there, Lauren. Spend it slowly." She didn't cry. She picked up every card, one by one, looked him dead in the eye, and said a single word, "Okay." And that word should have terrified him. If you believe a woman should never be punished for walking away, do me a favor before we go any further. Tap that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end of this story, because what happens in the final part is not what you think. And leave a comment telling me the city you're watching from right now. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. The signing had taken 11 minutes. That was the part Lauren Hayes Whitmore would remember later when people asked her how it felt. 12 years reduced to 11 minutes and a stack of paper that smelled faintly of toner. She had signed her name in the same careful handwriting she'd used on wedding thank you cards on hospital forms on the guest list for the gala that raised $4 million for the Children's Hospital, the gala everyone credited to Ethan. Across the table, Ethan hadn't looked at her once during the signing. He signed with the pen his father had given him, capped it, and slid it into his jacket pocket like a man closing a deal on a warehouse he'd never visit. His attorney, Marcus Delaney, cleared his throat. "That should conclude everything. Mrs. Whitmore, your counsel has copies of the—" "Ms. Hayes," Lauren said. Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry." "It's Ms. Hayes now. I filed the name restoration 2 weeks ago." Ethan laughed. It wasn't a full laugh. It was that short, dry sound he made in board meetings when someone presented a number he didn't like. 2 weeks ago, so you were already planning your little rebrand?" "I was planning my life," Lauren said. "Right." He stood and buttoned his jacket. "Well, good luck with the rebrand." Her own attorney, a tired, decent man named Peter Chen, whose firm was 3 rooms above a dry cleaner, gathered his files and said quietly, "Lauren, we should talk about the timeline for the settlement disbursement." "There is no settlement disbursement," Ethan said, and that was the first moment Peter Chen looked up. "Excuse me. The marital assets are held through Whitmore Global Holdings and 4 family trusts, Mr. Chen. You know that. You've known that for 8 months. The court didn't touch them because they were never hers." Ethan tapped the table twice with 2 fingers, a habit he had when he wanted the room to understand he was being generous with his time. "She gets what's in the joint accounts. That's the agreement she signed." Peter turned to her. "Lauren." "I know," she said. "You knew when you signed it." "I knew." And that was when Ethan finally looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered behind his eyes that he would spend the next year trying to remember. Because a woman who has just been stripped of a marriage and a fortune in the same hour does not look calm. She looks broken, or she looks angry, or she looks like she wants to throw something. Lauren looked patient. He shook it off. He walked out into the hallway. He made the call. She heard every word of it because he didn't step away to make it. That was the thing about Ethan Whitmore. He didn't hurt people in private. Hurting people in private did nothing for him. He needed a witness, and preferably he needed the witness to be the person he was hurting. "Freeze everything," he said into the phone. "Accounts cards, the apartment codes, all of it, today." Then the smile. Then the $400. Then, okay. Marcus Delaney had the decency to look at the floor. Lauren picked up her handbag, adjusted the strap on her shoulder, the way she did before charity luncheons, and walked toward the stairs instead of the elevator, because taking the stairs meant she would not have to stand in a small metal box with him for 40 seconds. Behind her, Ethan called out, "Lauren." She stopped. "Your mother's facility, Ridgeline, that's paid through the company foundation." He said it lightly, the way a man mentions the weather. "Somebody should probably look at that." She didn't turn around. "Nothing to say?" he asked. "I said okay already," Lauren answered. "I don't like to repeat myself." And she went down the stairs. Outside, the city did what the city always does, which is refuse to notice. Lauren stood on the courthouse steps with a small rolling suitcase she'd packed 3 days earlier, and she made herself breathe 4 counts in and 6 counts out the way the therapist she'd seen in secret for 2 years had taught her. Then she walked 2 blocks and went into a coffee shop, because she wanted to know how bad it was, and she wanted to know immediately. She ordered a small black coffee, $2.95. The card declined. The girl behind the register may be 20, with a nose ring and a name tag that said, Corey turned the screen around apologetically. It's saying declined. Sometimes the readers weird want me to try again. Try it again, Lauren said. Declined. I have another one. She handed over the second card. Declined. The third. Declined. I'm so sorry, Corey said. And she looked genuinely miserable about it. And Lauren thought of all the people in this city. This stranger is the first one today who felt bad for me. Lauren opened her wallet. $412 exactly as Ethan had said, because Ethan had access to the account and had checked the balance before the hearing and had done the math specifically so he could say the number out loud. She paid with a 5 and told Corey to keep the change. You okay? Corey asked. I'm going to be, Lauren said. Ask me again in a year. She sat by the window and did not drink the coffee for a long time. She simply held the cup with both hands because her hands were cold and because a woman holding a coffee cup looks like a woman who belongs somewhere. Then she took out her phone and started making a list. Not a list of what she'd lost, a list of what he'd just done. Freezing the joint accounts before the disbursement window closed. Terminating her building access on the same day. Referencing Ridgeline, her mother's memory care facility, out loud in front of his own attorney. She typed each one with the timestamp beside it. Then she wrote a fourth line and looked at it for a long moment before she saved it. He's not being cruel, he's being sloppy. 2 hours later on the 39th floor of the Whitmore building, Ethan Whitmore was pouring bourbon at 4 p.m. Gentlemen, he said, the drought is over. There were 5 of them in the office. Marcus Delaney, who had come straight from the courthouse and had not taken off his coat. Dominic Reyes, the head of acquisitions, who laughed at everything Ethan said within half a second. 2 junior partners whose names Ethan sometimes mixed up. And Rachel Okonjo, senior vice president of operations, who had been with the company 9 years and had not said a word since she walked in. 12 years, Ethan said. 12 years of that woman telling me what I couldn't do. To freedom, Dominic said, lifting his glass. To clarity, Ethan corrected. Freedom is what you get when someone lets you go. Clarity is what you get when you take it. Rachel set her glass down without drinking. Rachel. Ethan noticed everything that was the terrible truth about him. You're not celebrating. It's 4 p.m, and we have the Harbor Point lender call at 5, she said. The lender call is a formality. The lender call is with Northbridge, and Northbridge has asked for the revised cost basis 3 times. Ethan waved a hand. Then send them the cost basis. Which one? The room got very quiet. Ethan turned around slowly. Say that again. Rachel didn't flinch, and later she would tell her husband that she'd surprised herself that day. There are 2 cost basis models in the system, Ethan. The one we present and the one Walter built before he left. They're 11% apart. Northbridge is asking a specific question, and if we send the wrong document, we've told them something we can't untell. Walter Grant hasn't worked here in 3 years. His model is still the one the site engineers use. Then the site engineers are wrong, Ethan said. Dominic laughed. Nobody joined him. Send them the presentation model, Ethan said. And Rachel, do me a favor. Today of all days, don't bring me a problem dressed up as a question. Rachel gathered her tablet. At the door she paused, and this was the moment that mattered, though nobody in the room understood it yet. Ethan, she said, did you really freeze her accounts? I closed a joint account. That's a banking action, not a war crime. And the apartment, it's a corporate asset. And Ridgeline? Ethan's jaw moved. Ridgeline is a foundation disbursement, and the foundation is under review. Since when? Since about 11:40 this morning, he said, and he smiled, and Rachel Okonjo went back to her desk and sat there for a full 4 minutes without touching her keyboard, and then she opened a personal email account she had never once used from a company computer, and she typed a name into the search bar. Lauren Hayes. And then she deleted it and closed the window and told herself she was being dramatic. That night, Lauren took a bus, not a car service. A bus out of the city 41 minutes to a town where her sister Diane had found her. A 1-bedroom above a hardware store for $1,100 a month. First month waived because the landlord's wife had breast cancer, and Lauren had once quietly gotten that woman a second opinion at a hospital that had a 6-month waiting list. Diane was standing on the sidewalk when the bus pulled in. She was 3 years older, a school nurse, and she had never once in 12 years asked Lauren for a dime. "Don't," Lauren said. "Don't what? Don't look at me like that." "I'm allowed to look at my sister however I want," Diane said, and hugged her, and Lauren let herself be held for exactly 10 seconds before she stepped back and picked up the suitcase handle. Upstairs, Diane made tea in a mug that said "World's Okayest Aunt" and sat on the floor because there was only one chair. "So how bad?" she said. $407. Jesus, Lauren. "And Ridgeline." Diane's face changed. "He wouldn't." He said it out loud in a hallway with his lawyer standing there. "That's Mom." Diane's voice cracked on the word. "That's our mother, Lauren. She doesn't even know what year it is. She calls me by the dog's name." "I know. 19,000 a month, that place. 19. Diane pressed her palms into her eyes. "I can cover maybe 2 of it. Maybe. If I don't fix the car." "You're not covering any of it. Then who is?" Lauren set down her tea. "Diane," she said, "I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not ask questions for about 60 seconds. Okay? 4 years ago, I opened an account at a credit union in Poughkeepsie under my maiden name. It's not large. It's $91,000, and every dollar of it came from consulting work I did under a contract Ethan never saw for a firm in Boston, doing exactly what I did for him for free for 12 years. It's clean. It's declared. I paid taxes on all of it." Diane's mouth opened. 60 seconds, Lauren reminded her. "Sorry. There is also a storage unit in Yonkers that I've paid on for 5 years. Cash. In it there are 9 boxes. Lauren's voice didn't change at all, and that was somehow the most frightening part. Those boxes contain every quarterly Harbor Point projection from the day the project was conceived, the original geotechnical survey, the revised geotechnical survey, the correspondence about why there was a revised geotechnical survey, and the signature page of a side letter to the Meridian Bay Partnership that does not appear in any filing Whitmore Global has ever made. Diane said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Lauren, what is that last one?" "That last one," Lauren said, "is the reason he's going to lose everything. You've been planning this." "No." And this was the truth, and Lauren needed her sister to hear it. "I've been documenting. There's a difference, and I need you to understand it, because if you don't understand it, nobody will. I didn't build a weapon. I built a record. For 5 years, I told myself I was building it, so that if it ever came apart, I could hand it to him and say, 'Look, fix this. I've already found it for you.' And you never handed it to him." "I tried. Twice." Lauren looked at the window. "The first time he said I was reading things I didn't understand. The second time he took my name off the foundation board." Diane sat back against the wall. "So what changes now?" "Now," Lauren said, "I stopped protecting him." Ethan Whitmore did not sleep well that first week, and he told himself it was the bourbon. On Thursday, he called a man named Gil Braddock, who had done work for the company before work that never appeared on an invoice, with an honest description. "I want to know where she's living, who she's talking to, and whether she's got money I don't know about," Ethan said. "That's 3 different jobs." "It's one job, Gil. It's her." Braddock came back 8 days later with a folder that made Ethan feel briefly wonderful. "She's in a walk-up above a hardware store in a town I had to look up. She takes the bus. She's applied for 4 jobs, all bookkeeping, all under $55,000. She got one of them at a company that services commercial HVAC. Her sister's covering some of her groceries. She's been to a food co-op twice." "A food co-op?" Ethan actually laughed. "She used to send back wine. She sold a watch." "Which one?" "Cartier. Got $1,800 for it. Place on 47th. Ethan sat back and let it settle over him like a warm bath. And if you had asked him at that moment whether he was a cruel man, he would have said no. Absolutely not. He was a man who had been provoked. "Anybody visiting her?" "Sister. And a guy once." "A guy." Ethan's tone sharpened by exactly 1 degree, And Braddock noticed because noticing was his job. Older, 70s, drove a Buick, stayed 2 hours. Name, plates came back to a Walter A. Grant White Plains. Ethan didn't move. "That means something?" Braddock asked. "No," Ethan said. "It meant something." Walter Grant had been the chief financial officer of Whitmore Global Holdings for 9 years. He had also been the only person in the company who had ever told Ethan no in front of other people, and he had done it exactly once in a conference room about a geotechnical report on a stretch of waterfront in the outer harbor. Ethan had removed him within a month cleanly with a retirement announcement and a party and a crystal bowl. "Gil," Ethan said, "I want to know every time that Buick moves." The Buick had arrived on a Tuesday, and Walter Grant had climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, because his knees were 74 years old, and the stairs did not care about his resume. Lauren opened the door before he knocked. "You look terrible," she said. "You look like a woman living above a hardware store." "Sit down, Walter." He sat in the one chair. She sat on a milk crate, and neither of them mentioned it. "I heard," he said. "Everybody heard." "I heard about your mother's facility." Lauren's hands went still. "How?" "Because Denise in accounts payable has worked there 22 years, and she has a mother, too." Walter took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, which was what he did instead of showing emotion. The disbursement was flagged Tuesday morning, not canceled. Flagged. Which means somebody wanted a $19,000 payment to fail and wanted to be able to say it was procedural. "That's Ethan." "That's Ethan," Walter agreed. "Walter," she leaned forward. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about your pension before you answer, because I will not pretend this is free." "Ask." "The Meridian Bayside letter." Walter Grant put his glasses back on very slowly. "You've seen it," he said. "I have a copy of the signature page." "How?" "Because in March of the year it was signed, Ethan asked me to bring a folder to the apartment because he'd left it, and he was on a plane and I was the only person he trusted to touch it." Lauren's voice was flat. "And I read it. I read all of it at the kitchen counter at 11 at night, and then I put it back exactly the way it was, and I went to bed and I didn't sleep. You never said anything." "I said something. I said it to him. He told me I was reading things I didn't understand." She smiled without any warmth at all. "So, I spent the next 4 years understanding them." Walter was quiet for almost a minute. Then he said, "Do you know what that letter does?" "I know what I think it does. I want to hear you say it." "It moves the completion guarantee off the project entity and onto the parent." Walter's hands were shaking slightly, and it wasn't age. "Which means, if Harbor Point misses its substantial completion date, the lenders don't foreclose on a hole in the ground. They come for Whitmore Global Holdings itself, every subsidiary, every fund, everything with his name on it. And the completion date was always fiction. It was fiction the day it was drafted, and it became a lie the day the second geotech came back and he ordered them to keep the original schedule anyway." Lauren nodded slowly. "Then here's my question," she said. "If somebody hypothetically asked a lender to simply confirm which entity holds the completion guarantee, not accuse, not allege, just ask, what happens?" Walter Grant looked at this woman sitting on a milk crate in a rented room with $400 to her name, and he understood fully and finally what he was in the room with. "What happens," he said, "is that the lender asks Whitmore Global the same question, and Whitmore Global has to answer it in writing. And the answer they give will either be a lie they've committed to paper or the truth. And if it's the truth, then every other lender in the syndicate has 30 days to reprice their risk." He exhaled. "And banks don't reprice risk, Lauren. Banks exit." Lauren stood and walked to the window and stood there with her arms folded. "He froze my accounts," she said, "because he wanted me to feel what it's like to have something taken from you by a person who's smiling." "Yes." "He put his hand on my mother's care to make sure I'd beg." "Yes." She turned around. "Walter, I want you to understand something, because you're going to be asked one day under oath what my state of mind was. I am not doing this because he hurt me. If he had taken every dollar and let my mother be, I would have gotten a job and moved on and let that building fall down on its own schedule." "Then why?" "Because he decided the only leverage worth using was an 81-year-old woman who doesn't know what year it is." Her voice finally cracked just once on the word woman, and she let it. "And a man who will do that to my mother will absolutely let a building open 6 months early with a foundation nobody signed off on. That's not two different men, Walter. That's the same man." Walter Grant sat in that chair for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and set something on the table. It was a flash drive, black, unlabeled, the kind you get free at a trade conference. 3 years I've had this in a coffee can," he said. "My wife thinks it's about a lawsuit. I told her it was about a lawsuit because I couldn't stand to tell her it was about my cowardice." Lauren didn't touch it. "What's on it?" "Everything I couldn't take with me on paper, including the email where he told me in writing on a Sunday night not to circulate the revised survey until after the closing." Walter's voice was completely steady now. He was smart about that email for about 4 sentences. Then he got angry, and he wasn't. Lauren picked up the flash drive, and in a walk-up above a hardware store with a bus schedule taped to the refrigerator and 11 days left before her mother's facility sent a second notice, she said the sentence that would eventually cost Ethan Whitmore $2.1 billion. Then let's ask the question. 3 weeks later, at 6:40 in the morning, Ethan Whitmore's phone rang. He was on a treadmill. He answered because the caller was Marcus Delaney, and Marcus Delaney did not call at 6:40. "We have something," Marcus said. "Say it." Northbridge sent a formal request for clarification on the Harbor Point completion guarantee. They want the entity confirmed in writing, signed by an officer within 10 business days. Ethan slowed the treadmill to a walk. "That's routine." "It isn't routine. Routine is a phone call to Rachel. This came from their general counsel, and it copies 2 other lenders. So somebody's doing their annual file cleanup." "Ethan," Marcus paused. "The request cites a specific document number." The treadmill stopped. "Say that again," Ethan said. "It cites a document number. The side letter. By number." Marcus's voice was careful in the way it got when he was billing $490 an hour to deliver news that would eventually require an entirely different attorney. "That document is not in any public filing. It's not in the data room. There are, by my count, 6 people alive who have seen the executed version." Ethan stood there in a room with a view of a park he had once bought an apartment specifically to look at, and for the first time in 11 years, he felt his heart in his throat. "Name the 6, he said. "You, me, Walter Grant. 2 people at Meridian Bay who are contractually silenced. And," Marcus stopped. "And," Ethan said, "and whoever notarized it." That wasn't the name Marcus had almost said, and both men knew it, and neither man said it out loud, because saying it out loud would have made it true at 6:40 in the morning on a Tuesday. Ethan hung up. He stood in his kitchen. He looked at the counter, the specific counter, the one where a woman had once stood at 11 o'clock at night, with a folder she was not supposed to open, and he had come home from a plane at 1 in the morning and found her asleep on the couch, and he had thought, without any particular feeling, that she looked tired. He had asked her about it a week later. He remembered it now with a clarity that made him sick. "You looked at the Meridian folder," he'd said. "I did. And I think you're personally guaranteeing a completion date you can't hit." And he had laughed and kissed her forehead and said the sentence that would end him. "Lauren, sweetheart, you're reading things you don't understand." He picked up his phone and called Gil Braddock. "I want everything on her," he said. "Not where she buys groceries. Everything. Phone records, associates, every person that woman has spoken to in 5 years. That's not a thing I can just—" "I don't care what it is," Ethan said. "I want to know who she's talking to. And if it's nobody—" Ethan looked out at the park. "It's not nobody," he said. "She said okay." "What?" "On the courthouse steps. I took everything from her and she said okay." His voice was strange, thin, almost wondering. "Nobody says okay, Gil. People scream or they cry or they say I'll ruin you. Nobody says okay unless they already know something you don't." That same morning, 90 minutes north, Lauren Hayes sat in a small office at an HVAC service company, reconciling invoices for $22 an hour, and her phone buzzed once against the desk. She turned it over. The message was 4 words long from a number she had saved under the letter C. They asked the question, Lauren read it twice. Then she set the phone face down, picked up the next invoice, and kept working because the woman who owned the HVAC company was a 63-year-old former Marine named Patty, who did not tolerate phones on the desk, and because Lauren Hayes had learned something in 12 years of marriage that Ethan Whitmore would never learn in his entire life. The person who wins is not the one who reacts first. It's the one who can wait. At 11 o'clock, Patty leaned in the doorway with a mug in her hand. "You're new, so I'll say this once," Patty said. "You do this job like somebody's grading it." "Sorry." "That's not a complaint, it's an observation." Patty studied her. "You did this before, somewhere big." "Something like that." "And now you're here." "And now I'm here." Patty nodded slowly. "My husband left me in '94. Took the truck, took the dog, took $11,000 out of the credit union on a Friday afternoon so it wouldn't post till Monday." She sipped her coffee. "You know what I learned?" "What?" "That a man who takes everything from you thinks that's the end of the conversation." Patty turned to leave, then added without any particular drama, "It's usually about the middle." Lauren sat very still after she left. Then she opened her personal email and typed a message to an address at a firm called Redgate Partners, a private investment group with $14 billion under management and a reputation for buying distressed positions in projects that other people had lied about. The message was 3 lines. "The request has been made. Northbridge has 10 business days. When the answer comes back, you will want to be the first call the syndicate makes, and I would like to walk you through what happens on day 11. She hesitated for perhaps 2 seconds over the signature. Then she typed it. Lauren Hayes. Not Whitmore. Not the name on the buildings. Hayes. She hit send at 11:14 in the morning, and then she went back to reconciling invoices for a company that installed rooftop condensers in strip malls, and nobody in that office had the faintest idea that the woman at the second desk had just started a fire under $2.1 billion. That evening, Ethan called her. It was the first time in 37 days. Lauren was standing at the counter eating rice out of a pot when the phone lit up with his name, and she looked at it for 4 full rings before she answered. "Hello, Ethan. You sound calm. I'm eating dinner." "Where?" "In my kitchen." "Your kitchen," he repeated, and she could hear him smiling, and she could also hear something underneath the smile that had never been there before. "How's that going?" "It's small," she said. "It's mine." There was a pause. "I've been thinking about the foundation," Ethan said. "Have you?" "Your mother's facility. Ridgeline." He let it sit there a moment. "I think there's a way to get that reinstated. There'd have to be a conversation about certain things. Documents, property, some items that left the apartment that arguably weren't yours to take." Lauren set down the pot. "Say what you mean, Ethan." "I mean, I'd like my folder back," he said. And there it was. She closed her eyes, and she felt something that she had not expected to feel, which was not triumph and not fear, but a deep, exhausted sadness, because in that sentence was the confirmation of everything. He knew what he had signed. He had always known. He had known when he laughed at her. He had known when he kissed her forehead. He had known when he said, "Sweetheart." "You want the folder," she said. "I want what's mine. And in exchange, my mother gets to keep her bed. Is that the offer? Don't make it ugly." "Ethan." Her voice was so quiet, he had to press the phone harder against his ear. "You made it ugly in a hallway with your lawyer standing 4 feet away. I just wrote it down." Silence. "What did you say?" "I said I wrote it down." She picked up the pot again. 11:41 in the morning. You said, and I'm quoting your mother's facility, Ridgeline, that's paid through the company foundation. Somebody should probably look at that. Marcus Delaney heard you say it. So did a bailiff named Anthony who was standing by the stairwell door and who I have since spoken to. You spoke to a bailiff. I spoke to a witness. She could hear him breathing. Lauren. And now his voice changed, and this was the version she had lived with for 12 years. The warm one, the one that made rooms of powerful men lean forward. "Come on, this is us. This is a bad month and a long life. You want the apartment back? Take the apartment. I'll have Marcus draw something up tomorrow. Generous? More than generous. We'll put a number on it. That means you never think about money again. No. You haven't heard the number. I don't need the number. Everybody needs the number, Lauren. That, she said, is the single truest thing you have ever said about yourself. He was quiet. Then very softly, he asked the question he had come to ask, the one all the rest of it had been scaffolding for. Did you call Northbridge? Lauren looked out the window at a hardware store sign and a parking lot and a town he could not have found on a map. No, she said. And it was true. She hadn't called Northbridge. She had called a man named Corbin Hale at Redgate Partners, and Corbin Hale had called a former colleague who now sat on the credit committee at a Swiss institution that held 11% of the Harbor Point Syndicate. And that man had asked a single question in a routine Thursday meeting, and a junior analyst had gone looking for the answer, and the answer had not been where it was supposed to be. That was the whole thing. That was the entire architecture of the fall of Whitmore Global Holdings. One woman, one phone call, one question that a very smart man had spent 4 years hoping nobody would think to ask. Then who did? Ethan said. Ethan. Who did, Lauren? You did, she said. What? You did. She was surprised at how steady she sounded. You signed a guarantee you couldn't cover, you buried the survey that proved it, and you fired the only man who tried to stop you. And then this month you decided the smartest thing to do with all that exposure sitting under your name was to go out of your way to make an enemy out of the one person who had read every page of it. Silence on the line, long enough that she thought he'd hung up. You've had this the whole time, he said. Yes, 12 years. 5. Why didn't you use it? And there it was, the real question, the one that revealed everything about the man asking it. Lauren felt her throat tighten, and she let it because there was no one in the room to see. Because I was your wife, she said, and I kept thinking that one day you were going to come home and tell me you were scared, and I was going to say, I know I've got it. I've had it for years. Sit down and let me show you how we fix this. Her voice broke and she didn't hide it. I built that folder to save you, Ethan, every single page of it. I built it to save you, Lauren. And then you froze an account so I couldn't buy a cup of coffee, and you said my mother's name out loud in a hallway to watch my face. Lauren, listen to me. 10 business days, she said. What? Northbridge gave you 10 business days to confirm which entity holds the completion guarantee. In writing, signed by an officer. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. You have 3 choices, and I want you to hear all 3 from me before you hear them from a lawyer who charges you $500 an hour to be less honest. You can tell them the truth, and every bank in that syndicate reprices you inside 30 days. You can lie in writing and put a federal signature on it, or you can say nothing and let the 10 days run out and default on a documentation covenant, which triggers a review clause in Section 9 that I don't think you have read since the day you signed it. She could hear him sitting down. She actually heard the chair. Ethan, she said, and she was gentle now. And that was the worst part, because gentleness from her had once been the safest place in his life. There isn't a version of this where you win. There's only a version where you finally tell the truth and salvage something. That's it. That's the whole menu. And you'd do that. His voice was hollow. You'd take everything I built. I'm not taking anything, Lauren said. I'm just not carrying it for you anymore. She hung up. She stood in that kitchen for a long time with her hands flat on the counter. Then her phone buzzed one more time. Not Ethan. The number saved under the letter C. Northbridge got an answer. 22 minutes ago, signed by an officer. Lauren stared at the screen. She typed back with hands that would not stay still. Which answer? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Lauren, it wasn't Ethan who signed it. She frowned. Then who? The reply came and she read it, and she set the phone down on the counter very carefully, the way you set down something that might go off. Rachel Okonjo, Senior Vice President of Operations. And she didn't just confirm the entity. She attached the revised geotechnical survey, all 90 pages of it, to the entire syndicate. At 11:40 that night, Ethan Whitmore was standing in his own living room with a phone in each hand, and neither one of them was telling him anything he wanted to hear. Say it slower, he said. "There's no slower version," Marcus Delaney said. "Rachel Okonjo answered the Northbridge request at 9:04. She signed it as an authorized officer, which she is. She confirmed the completion guarantee sits with the parent, which it does. And then she attached the revised geotechnical survey as supporting documentation. To Northbridge. To the distribution list. Ethan, the distribution list is the entire syndicate, 11 institutions, plus counsel for 4 of them." Ethan set the second phone down on the counter because his hand had started shaking and he did not want to hear it rattle. "Pull it back. You can't pull back an email to 11 banks. Then call them. Call every one of them and tell them it was sent in error. Tell them it's an unverified draft. Tell them the survey is a fake." Marcus's voice went flat. "Is that the instruction? Because I want to be very clear with you about what I'm allowed to write down and what I'm not." Ethan didn't answer. "That's what I thought," Marcus said. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long." 20 minutes later, Ethan called Rachel Okonjo's cell. She picked up on the second ring, which somehow made it worse. "You destroyed 9 years of work in a single click," he said. "Good evening to you too." "Do you understand what you did?" "Better than you do," Rachel said. "Which is the whole problem, Ethan, and it's been the problem for about 4 years. You're finished, you know that. You're finished in this city." "Maybe. Maybe that's your answer. Maybe. My answer is that at 9:04 tonight, I stopped being the person who has to lie awake wondering when it lands on me," she said. "You want to talk about what I destroyed? Fine, let's talk about what you asked me to send instead. I asked you to send the presentation model. You asked me to answer a legal request for a specific document with a marketing deck." Her voice didn't rise once. That was what he'd remember later. "And I said which cost basis, and you told me not to bring you a problem dressed up as a question." "So this is personal." Rachel actually laughed. "No, this is the least personal thing I have ever done in my life. If it were personal, I'd have gone to a reporter. I went to the lender. That's the difference between revenge and doing your job, and you've never been able to tell them apart. I want your badge on my desk by 8. "I mailed it," Rachel said, "along with a letter to the board, a letter to outside counsel, and a copy of everything to my own attorney, who is very good and who I have been paying out of pocket since March. Good night, Ethan." She hung up first. He stood there for a long time, and then he did something he had not done in 11 years. He called his father's old chairman, a 79-year-old man named Gordon Ray, who had put the first $8 million into Whitmore Global when Ethan was 31 and unbearable. "It's late," Gordon said. "I need you on my side tomorrow." "Ethan." A pause. "I've had the survey in my inbox for 2 hours, so have the other 6 directors." Ethan's mouth went dry. "Gordon, I'm going to ask you one question, son, and I want you to think very carefully, because the answer determines whether I spend my last good years defending you or apologizing for you." The old man's voice was gentle, and it cut like a wire. "Did you know—" Ethan looked at the window. "I want you to say it out loud," Gordon said. "It was a scheduling issue." "Did you know?" Gordon. "That's an answer," Gordon Ray said and hung up. And that was the moment Ethan Whitmore understood that the man who had walked him down the aisle at his own father's funeral was gone. At 6:15 the next morning, 90 minutes north, Lauren Hayes was sitting on the edge of a bed she had bought secondhand, reading the same 6 words for the 9th time. Rachel Okonjo, Senior Vice President of Operations. She called the number saved under C. Corbin Hale picked up immediately, which told her he hadn't slept either. "You didn't do this," he said. "No." "You're sure?" "Corbin. I've never spoken to Rachel Okonjo in my life. I've been in a room with her maybe 4 times, all of them at parties, all of them for about 90 seconds. Then we have a problem." "Say it." "The problem is that this is now a public collapse instead of a controlled one." He was walking. She could hear it. 48 hours ago, we had a quiet question sitting in a lender's inbox and a very orderly path to a negotiated restructuring in which certain people who behaved badly get removed and certain assets change hands, and nobody has to explain anything to a grand jury. That's gone. As of 9:04 last night, 11 institutions are all reading the same 90 pages at the same time, and 11 institutions reading the same 90 pages at the same time is not a restructuring, Lauren. It's a stampede. And a stampede hurts who? Everyone. He stopped walking. Including potentially you. Lauren closed her eyes. Say the rest of it. The rest of it is that the second this becomes a fight, the first thing his lawyers will do is stop defending the project and start attacking the source. And you're the source, not Rachel. Rachel had authority. Rachel had a signature. Rachel sent a document she had lawful access to. You're a former spouse with a storage unit. I paid for that storage unit with my own money. I know. For 5 years. Lauren. His voice softened, and she hated that more than the rest of it. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying that a man with $2.1 billion on fire is about to go looking for somebody to burn, and the fastest, cheapest, most emotionally satisfying target available to him is the woman he already believes he owns. She sat with that. How long do I have? She said. Before what? Before he files something. Corbin Hale was quiet for exactly the length of time it takes an honest man to decide to be honest. 2 days, he said. Maybe 3. He'll want it in front of a judge before the board meets. At 7:50 that morning, the phone rang again, and it was not Corbin. Is this Lauren Hayes? Speaking. This is Angela Ruiz. I'm the admissions director at Ridgeline Memory Care. I'm calling about your mother, Eileen. Lauren stood up so fast the room tilted. Is she all right? She's fine. She's absolutely fine. She had oatmeal this morning and she told our aide her hair looked ridiculous, which for Eileen is a very good day. A breath. I'm calling because the July disbursement didn't clear, and now August has been flagged as well, and our policy is that after 2 cycles, I have to send a formal notice to the responsible party and to the state. How long does the notice give me? 14 days from issue. And Ms. Hayes, I want to be straight with you because I've been doing this 19 years, and I've watched families get destroyed by people being polite instead of clear. Angela's voice dropped. The notice hasn't gone out yet. It's sitting on my desk. I can hold it until Monday. I cannot hold it past Monday because after Monday it stops being a kindness and starts being my license. Lauren pressed her hand flat against the wall. 38,000, she said. 2 months. 38,100. Angela, does she know? Does she know what, honey? Does she know that anything's wrong? There was a pause on the other end that lasted about 2 seconds and cost Lauren more than the 12 years had. She asked about you yesterday, Angela said. She called you Diane, but she was asking about you. She wanted to know if the one with the serious face had eaten. Lauren put her hand over her mouth. Monday, she said when she could. Monday. At 9:10, Ethan Whitmore walked into his own headquarters and understood before he reached the elevator that something had changed in the building. Nobody looked up. That was all. Nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. 26 people on the ground floor and the lobby desk and the coffee cart, and every single one of them found a reason to be looking somewhere else, and Ethan rode up 39 floors with his jaw locked so tight it ached. Dominic Reyes was waiting outside his office. How bad? Ethan said. Northbridge pulled the standby facility at 8. That's 400 million. 415. And Halloway Trust just asked for a meeting, which is a nice way of saying they want to look at us while we answer. Fine. Set it. There's one more thing. Dominic's throat moved. 3 of the site engineers didn't come in. They what? They didn't come in. Not sick. Their supervisor called, and 2 of them said they'd been advised by counsel not to be on that site until the survey question is resolved. Advised by counsel? Ethan's laugh had no air in it. Since when do concrete guys have counsel? Since 90 pages of geotech went out to 11 banks with their names in the appendix, Dominic said, and then quieter. Ethan, their names are in the appendix. They signed the observations. If that building has a problem, they're on the paper. And there it was, the thing Ethan had never once considered in 4 years, laid out by a man he'd hired mostly for his laugh. Other people were on the paper, too. At 10:20, Gil Braddock called with what he thought was good news. Storage unit, he said. Yonkers. Rented under Hayes, paid cash 5 years running Unit 229. Ethan sat down slowly. How big? 10 by 10. Manager says she comes maybe twice a year, stays an hour, leaves with nothing. Stays an hour and leaves with nothing. That's what he said, which meant she wasn't storing things there. She was reading there. She had been sitting inside a 10-by-10 metal box in Yonkers twice a year for 5 years, going through his life page by page and then locking it and going home and making him dinner. Ethan felt something crawl up the back of his neck. What else? The Buick, Walter Grant. He's been out twice more, and here's the piece you'll want. Braddock paused for effect, because he always did. Grant's got a wife with a heart condition, and he's on your company retiree health plan. That plan is administered by a subsidiary you control. Ethan didn't say anything. I'm not telling you to do anything, Braddock said. I'm telling you what's true. I understand what you're telling me. There's one more. The bailiff. What bailiff? Anthony Serrano, courthouse security, 22 years. She contacted him 3 weeks ago. He gave a statement to her attorney about what he heard in the hallway on the day of the signing. Ethan closed his eyes. She had told him that on the phone. She had told him plainly, and he had heard it as a bluff, because in 12 years, Lauren Hayes had never once said something she couldn't back, and he had somehow still filed her under bluff. Ethan. Get me the unit number in writing, Ethan said. Ann Gill, the wife with the heart condition. Don't touch it. Understood. I mean it. Don't touch it. Understood, Braddock said, and Ethan hung up, believing honestly and completely that he had just been a decent man. He believed that for 4 hours. At 2:15 that afternoon, Walter Grant's phone rang in his kitchen in White Plains, and the voice on the other end was a very pleasant young woman from a benefits administration company. Mr. Grant, we're conducting a routine eligibility audit on legacy retiree plans, and we're showing an inconsistency in your spouse's enrollment documentation. Walter set down his coffee. There's no inconsistency. She's been on that plan 11 years. Yes, sir, I see that. The issue is a missing dependent verification from the original enrollment, and until it's resolved, the system will place the coverage in pending status. Pending status, which means claims won't process during the review period. And how long is the review period? Typically 90 days, sir. Walter Grant, who was 74 years old and had run the finances of a company worth billions, stood in his kitchen and did arithmetic he had never wanted to do. His wife's cardiologist, the device check every 60 days, the 2 medications that ran $1,100 a month without the plan. Who ordered the audit? He said. I'm sorry. It's a simple question. Somebody flags an 11-year-old enrollment on a Thursday afternoon. Who? Sir, audits are generated automatically. Miss. Walter's voice was very kind and very old and very tired. I built the system that generates those audits. Nothing in it is automatic on a Thursday. The line was silent. I'll note your inquiry, she said. He hung up and sat down at his kitchen table and did not move for 11 minutes. Then he called Lauren. He got to my wife's coverage, he said. Lauren didn't speak. I want you to hear the rest before you say anything, Walter went on, because I know what you're about to do, and I'm asking you not to. Walter, you're about to tell me to walk away and that you'll handle it alone. Yes. Lauren, I have exactly one thing left. His voice broke on the word one. I sat in a room 3 years ago, and I watched a man bury a survey, and I said nothing, and I took a crystal bowl and I went home. And every night since then, I've laid in bed next to a woman with a bad heart and thought, if that building comes down, I helped. Not because I signed it, because I was quiet. He breathed. You don't get to take my second chance away from me to keep me comfortable. That's not mercy. That's just you deciding what I can survive. Lauren pressed the heel of her hand into her eyes. Then what do you want to do? I want to file the affidavit, Walter said. Today, not in 30 days when it's convenient. Today, because the second it's on a docket hurting me stops being clever and starts being evidence. He'll destroy you. He'll try, Walter said, but he can only destroy a man who's still hiding something. At 4:40, Lauren's landlord knocked on her door with an envelope in his hand and an expression she'd never seen on him. Guy came by, he said. Wanted me to confirm you live here. I said I don't confirm anything, and he left this. The envelope was from a firm on Park Avenue. Inside were 41 pages. Whitmore Global Holdings, LLC, versus Lauren M. Hayes. misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of proprietary corporate records, tortious interference with contractual relations. And on page 36, the thing that made her sit down on the stairs, an emergency application for a temporary restraining order and an order permitting immediate inspection and impoundment of the contents of Storage Unit 229. Hearing set for Monday, 9 a.m. Monday, the same Monday. She sat on those stairs with 41 pages in her lap and understood with a clarity that made her almost admire him exactly what he had done. He had put her mother and her evidence on the same day. She called Peter Chen. "I've been served." "I know. I got it 40 minutes ago and I've read it twice." Peter sounded like a man running up a flight of stairs. "Lauren, I have to be honest with you about something and I have to do it fast." "Go." "I do wills, real estate closings, and small business incorporations. I took your divorce because your sister asked me to, and because I thought I was helping a woman get out of a bad marriage." He exhaled. "This is federal-adjacent commercial litigation against a firm that has 41 lawyers on this one filing. I will absolutely stand next to you Monday morning, and I will fight for you, and I want you to understand that I am not the right person, and that a real one would tell you that." Lauren almost smiled. "You just did tell me that. I'm telling you because we've got 72 hours. What do we need? 3 things. 1, a declaration explaining where every document came from and how you got it. And Lauren, if there's one page in that unit you took from a locked drawer, I need to know now, not Monday." "There isn't." "Say it like a lawyer." "Every document in that unit came to me either as a spouse with authorized access to shared household files, or was provided to me voluntarily by a former officer of the company, or was obtained from public filings." She recited it evenly. "I have never accessed a company server. I have never used a company credential. I have never taken a physical document from that building." Peter was quiet a beat. "You've said that before." "I've said it to myself for 5 years every night before I let myself sleep." "Okay, 2, we need Walter Grant on paper before Monday." "He's filing tomorrow." "He's what, bon moi?" "He called me this afternoon and told me he was going to." "Lauren, that's—" Peter stopped. "That's very good. What's 3? 3 is $38,100 for a memory care facility by Monday because I read the exhibit list and their own filing mentions the foundation disbursement." His voice hardened. "They put it in their own papers, Lauren. They cited the suspension of your mother's funding as evidence that you had a financial motive to steal." Lauren's hand tightened on the railing until her knuckles went white. "Say that again." "They used your mother as a motive. They put it in writing. They put it in writing." And there it was, the second gift Ethan Whitmore gave her that week, without ever meaning to. "Peter," she said, "how fast can you get that exhibit in front of a judge with a bailiff's sworn statement stapled to it?" At 7 that evening, Diane came over with a grocery bag and found her sister sitting on the floor with 41 pages spread out around her in a half circle. "Tell me," Diane said, "he's suing me." "For what?" "For everything I've got, which is a milk crate and a used bed." "That's not a lawsuit, that's a tantrum." "It's both," Lauren said. "And it works, Diane. That's the part people don't understand about men like him. It doesn't have to win. It just has to exist. The second there's a case with my name on it, every serious person who might have hired me or listened to me or stood next to me has a very good reason to wait and see." Diane sat down on the floor across from her. "How much for Mom?" $38,100. "I've got $4,000 in savings and a car worth maybe $6,000. "You're not selling your car. Lauren, you are a school nurse in a town with no bus line, and you are not selling your car." Lauren's voice cracked. "I will let you do a lot of things for me, not that." "Then what?" Lauren looked at the papers on the floor for a long moment. "There's $91,000 in Poughkeepsie. Then use it. If I use 38 of it on Monday, I have 53 left to fight 41 lawyers who bill more than that in 9 days." She laughed, and it wasn't a good laugh. "That's not a war chest, Diane. That's a countdown." "And if you don't use it?" Lauren didn't answer. "Say it. If I don't use it, they move her." Her voice was almost nothing. "State placement. Wherever there's a bed. She's been in that room 4 years, Diane. She doesn't know what year it is, but she knows that room. She knows where the window is. She reaches for the water glass without looking. Diane put her hand over her mouth. There's no version where I don't use it, Lauren said. I just needed to say the numbers out loud so I'd stop pretending there was. At 8:15, her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. Miss Hayes, my name is Rachel Okonjo. Lauren stood up off the floor. I know who you are, she said. I imagine you do. A pause. I've been sitting in my car for about 40 minutes trying to decide whether to make this call. Why? Because I've spent 4 years telling myself I was one of the good ones, and I'm about to find out if that was true. Rachel's voice was steady but thin. Ms. Hayes, I need to tell you something that nobody else alive knows except 2 lawyers and my husband, and once I tell you, you'll understand why I did what I did on Wednesday night, and you'll also understand why I'm in a great deal more trouble than you are. Go ahead. The Meridian Bay side letter, Rachel said. The executed original. The one with the completion guarantee. What about it? I notarized it. Lauren didn't move. Say that again. 9 years ago, I was 31 years old, and I was an operations analyst who'd gotten her notary commission because our office manager retired and somebody had to do it, Rachel said. And now the words were coming fast like a woman who had rehearsed them 1,000 times in a car. Ethan came to my desk on a Friday at 7 o'clock at night with a signature page, and he said, I need this stamped. And I said, sure, and I stamped it. I didn't read it. There was no reason to read it. Notaries don't read documents, they verify signatures. That's the whole job. Rachel. I didn't read it, she said again, and her voice finally broke. For 4 years, I've been lying awake doing the math on that stamp. My seal, my commission number, my journal entry on the single most dangerous document in the history of that company. And every time I thought about coming forward, I thought about what a lawyer would say to a jury. She stamped it. She was in the room. She knew. Did you know? No. When did you find out? 4 years ago, Rachel said, right around the time you did. Lauren sat down on the bed. How do you know when I found out? There was a silence on the line, and then Rachel Okonjo said the sentence that changed everything. Because in March of that year, Ethan called me at 11:40 at night from an airplane phone and told me to check whether the Meridian folder had been moved off his desk at the apartment. And I said I had no way to know that. And he said my wife brought it to me, and I want you to note the time she picked it up and the time she brought it back. Lauren's ears were ringing. He had it timed. Lauren's ears were... He had it timed, Rachel said. I wrote it in an email to myself that night because it frightened me, and I still have that email and the subject line is the date. He knew I read it. He's known for 4 years. Lauren stood up. She walked 4 steps and stopped because there weren't more than 4 steps to walk. Then why? She said. Why let me stay? Why let me sit at that table and go to those parties and stand behind him for 4 more years knowing I'd read it? She stopped because she already knew. Say it, Rachel said quietly. You've got it. Because a wife can't testify, Lauren said. Spousal privilege, Rachel said. He didn't keep you for 4 years because he loved you, Ms. Hayes. He kept you because you were the only person on earth who'd read that letter and couldn't be made to talk about it. Lauren stood in the middle of that small room with her hand over her chest, and the thing she felt was not rage. Rage would come later in the car on a Tuesday over nothing. What she felt right then was a grief so total it took her legs out from under her, because for 4 years she had been building a folder to save a man, and for 4 years that same man had been keeping her at his table the way you keep a safe in a wall. He signed the divorce anyway, she managed. Yes. Why? If I was that dangerous, why let me go? And Rachel Okonjo said the worst thing anyone said to Lauren Hayes that entire year. Because he genuinely believed you'd never use it, she said. He thought you'd walk out of that courthouse and cry for a year and get a bookkeeping job and never touch it. He wasn't protecting himself from you. He'd stopped seeing you as a person who could act at all. A beat. The freeze wasn't strategy, Ms. Hayes. He wasn't neutralizing a threat. He was just being cruel to somebody he'd already filed away as harmless. That's it. That's the whole reason your accounts were frozen. Lauren closed her eyes. 12 years. Ms. Hayes, are you there? I'm here. There's a reason I'm telling you all of this tonight and not next month. I know, Lauren said. Monday. Monday. His filing is going to say you took documents. Mine is going to say the documents were never the point. Rachel's voice steadied. I have a declaration ready. My attorney says filing it is the single stupidest legal decision she has ever seen a client make, and she's put that in writing and I've signed it anyway. Rachel, if you file, you put your own notary seal in front of a judge. Yes. You could lose your commission. You could lose more than that. Yes. Then why? There was a pause, and when Rachel spoke again, she sounded very young. Because on Wednesday morning, I read a request from a bank asking a simple question, and I realized I'd been waiting 4 years for somebody to ask it, she said. And then I found out the somebody was a woman living above a hardware store with $400 whose mother's nursing home he cut off to make a point. Her breath caught. I've got a mother too, Ms. Hayes. She's in Queens. She's 83. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I want to be able to sit in her kitchen. At 9:50, Lauren called Corbin Hale. You said 2 days, she said. It was 6 hours. I heard. I have the filing. Corbin, I need to ask you something, and I need the real answer, not the fund manager answer. Ask. Redgate wants to buy the distressed position, and Redgate wants me as an advisor because I know where every body is buried. That's the arrangement. That's been the arrangement since the first phone call, and neither of us ever said it out loud because it sounded better unspoken. Her voice was hard. So say it out loud now. What am I to you? Corbin Hale took his time. You're the reason the position is worth buying, he said. That's the honest answer. If Harbor Point unwinds cleanly, we make money. If it unwinds ugly in public, we make more. And you personally are the difference between those two outcomes. So I'm an asset. You're an asset with the name I like, he said. Lauren, I'm 58. I've done this for 31 years. I've been in a lot of rooms where somebody like you handed us something, and we thanked them and then let them get flattened, and I've never once done anything about it. So here's what I'll say, and you can hold me to it or throw it away. Monday morning, you'll have counsel, real counsel. A firm called Vance and Aldrich and a partner named Marisol Vance who has taken apart bigger men than Ethan Whitmore for sport. I can't afford... It's on our tab, and it's not a favor because I want you to be able to say under oath that no one bought your testimony. So the engagement letter is going to say something very specific. It's going to say Redgate is funding your defense with no right to direct it, no right to review your statements, and no clawback. He paused. My general counsel called that letter, and I'm quoting professional malpractice with a bow on it. I signed it an hour ago. Lauren sat down. Why? Because I read the paragraph about your mother, Corbin said, and for the first time in 6 weeks his voice wasn't a fund manager's at all. They put a memory care patient in a pleading as a motive, Lauren. 41 lawyers touched that document, and not one of them said maybe we don't. He let it sit. I've spent 30 years telling myself finance is immoral. That paragraph is the first thing I've read in a decade that made me want to lose money on purpose. At 6 the next morning, Ethan Whitmore woke to 18 missed calls and understood before he'd read a single one that Walter Grant had filed. The affidavit was 9 pages. It was not angry. That was the thing that took him apart. It was the flattest, driest, most patient document Ethan had ever read, written by a man who had spent 40 years making numbers behave, and paragraph 6 said this. On or about the 14th of that month, following receipt of the revised geotechnical findings, I recommended in writing that the substantial completion date be extended by not less than 11 months. I was instructed by Ethan Whitmore in writing not to circulate the revised survey to the lender group prior to the closing. I retained that instruction. It is attached hereto as Exhibit C. Exhibit C was 141 words long. Ethan read it standing up. Then he sat down on his own floor in a $9,000 suit in an apartment with a view of a park he'd bought an apartment to see, and he read it again. Walter, don't be a coward about this. Nobody circulates anything until we close. If the soil is bad in November, it will still be bad in February, and in February it's somebody else's problem. Sit on it. He had written that at 11 at night on a Sunday 3 years ago, and he could not remember doing it. That was the part that broke something in him. He couldn't remember. It hadn't been a decision. It had been a Sunday. At 7:40, Marcus Delaney called. 2 things, Marcus said. The board has called an emergency session for Tuesday, and Gordon Ray is chairing it personally. And the second thing? The second thing is that I'm withdrawing as your counsel. Ethan laughed out loud. You're what? There's an email in the record now with your name on it instructing an officer to withhold material information from a lender group prior to closing, Marcus said. That changes what I am. 2 days ago, I was your lawyer. Today, I'm a witness to how you responded when it surfaced, and I'd like to be a witness with clean hands. A pause. I've made arrangements for substitute counsel Monday and Ethan, as the last thing I will ever say to you as your attorney. Go ahead. Withdraw the motion on the storage unit. Absolutely not. Withdraw it, today, before 9 a.m. Monday. Marcus's voice was urgent, in a way Ethan had never heard from him. You are about to walk into a courtroom and ask a judge for permission to seize a woman's boxes on the same morning her mother's care runs out, and your own pleading explains the connection. Do you understand what that looks like from the bench? It looks like a company protecting its property. It looks like a man reaching across a courtroom to grab somebody's mother, Marcus said. Goodbye, Ethan. At 8:55 on Monday morning, Lauren Hayes walked into a courthouse for the second time in her life, wearing the same coat she'd worn out of it in June, and she was not alone. Peter Chen was on her left, holding a banker's box with both arms like a man carrying something hot. On her right was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair cut short who had introduced herself in the hallway 11 minutes earlier by saying, Marisol Vance, I've read everything. Don't speak unless I touch your arm. Behind them in the third row sat Walter Grant in a suit that no longer fit him, and Rachel Okonjo with her attorney and Diane, who had taken a personal day she could not afford. And at 7 that morning, Lauren had wired $38,100 to Ridgeline Memory Care from an account in Poughkeepsie, and had stood in a parking lot afterward and cried for exactly 90 seconds, and then wiped her face and gotten on a train. Ethan came in at 9:02 with a lawyer he had met the previous evening. He did not look at her. That was the first thing that surprised her. In 12 years, Ethan Whitmore had never been in a room with her, and not looked at her because looking at her had always been part of how he arranged the room. He looked at the table. The judge was a small, unhurried woman named Priya Raghavan, who had been on that bench for 19 years, and she began by saying she had read everything, which is the sentence lawyers most fear and most hope for. Counsel for the movement, she said. You've asked me for immediate impoundment of the contents of a private storage unit. Walk me to it. Ethan's new lawyer stood and gave a very competent 4 minutes about proprietary records and irreparable harm. Judge Raghavan listened without moving. Then she said, Paragraph 41. The lawyer stopped. Your Honor, Paragraph 41 of your own application, she said. You cite the suspension of a foundation disbursement to a memory care facility as evidence of the respondent's financial motive. Yes, Your Honor, that goes to Tsao, who suspended it. The courtroom got so quiet that Lauren could hear the clock. I'm sorry, Your Honor. It's not a complicated question, Judge Raghavan said. Your client's papers argue that this woman had a financial motive to steal because her mother's care was cut off. I'd like to know who cut it off. The lawyer looked down at 41 pages he had received 19 hours earlier, and behind him at the table, Ethan Whitmore finally lifted his head and looked across the aisle at his ex-wife for the first time in 71 days. Lauren didn't look away. Your Honor, his lawyer said carefully, the foundation placed the disbursement under review as part of a general audit. On what date? I'd have to confirm. I have it, Marisol Vance said, standing. 11:41 a.m., same day as the decree. And, Your Honor, I have a sworn statement from a court officer employed in this building who was standing approximately 4 feet away when Mr. Whitmore announced his intention to do it in this courthouse in a stairwell corridor on the 4th floor. Judge Raghavan set down her pen. Mr. Whitmore, she said, stand up. He stood. I'm not going to ask you a question because you have counsel, and I'm not in the business of harvesting admissions from the bench, she said. I'm going to tell you what happens now. Your application for immediate impoundment is denied. Your request for a temporary restraining order is denied. Instead, I'm ordering that the contents of Unit 229 be inventoried and preserved under supervision of a neutral custodian appointed by this court, with copies to both parties and to no one else. Your Honor. I'm not finished. Sheriff's deputy and the custodian will proceed there directly from this courtroom today, and both counsel may attend. And Mr. Whitmore. She looked at him over her glasses. If I learn that anything in that unit was interfered with between the filing of this application and the execution of that order, I will make it the most interesting week of your life. The gavel came down at 9:41. At 1:19 that afternoon, a court-appointed custodian named Howard Pike cut the lock on Unit 229 in Yonkers, while a sheriff's deputy stood beside him, and Marisol Vance stood beside her, and Ethan's lawyer stood 8 feet back with his phone in his hand. Lauren watched the door roll up. She had been in that unit 9 days before the divorce, and she knew exactly what was in it. 9 boxes stacked 3 across and 3 high against the back wall, labeled with years in her own handwriting. Howard Pike stepped inside with a clipboard. Then he stopped. He stood there for what felt like a very long time, and then he turned around and looked at the deputy, and then at Marisol Vance, and then at Lauren. "Ma'am," he said, "how many boxes did you say 9? "Ma'am," Howard Pike said, "there aren't any." Marisol Vance did not move for 3 seconds, and in 19 years of practice, 3 seconds was the longest she had ever taken. "Mr. Pike," she said, "define none." Howard Pike stepped back out into the corridor with his clipboard hanging at his side. "I mean, the unit's empty. There's a broom against the back wall and about 100 dust marks on the floor in a 3x3 pattern, which tells me there were boxes in there at some point, and there aren't now." Ethan's lawyer, a man named Curtis Yao, who had been handed 41 pages 19 hours earlier and was now watching his career get interesting, put his phone to his ear and started walking away fast. "Curtis," Marisol said, "where are you going?" "I'm calling my client." "You're calling the court." "I'm calling my client and then the court." "Reverse it," Marisol said, "or I will put in a declaration tonight that opposing counsel left the site of a court-ordered inventory to speak privately with a party before notifying the judge, and I will read it out loud on Wednesday in a voice that carries." Curtis Yao stopped walking. Lauren hadn't said anything at all. She was standing in front of an open 10x10 metal room, looking at a floor she knew at 9 perfect rectangles of clean concrete, surrounded by 5 years of grit, and the sound in her ears was not thought. It was a high, flat ringing. "Ms. Hayes." The sheriff's deputy, a heavy-set man in his 40s named Alvarez, spoke gently, which was somehow worse. "When were you last here?" "May. Of this year, May 10th, before any of this. And you're sure about what was in it?" 9 boxes, Lauren said. 3 across 3 high against that wall. I labeled them by year in marker. The top left one had a coffee ring on the lid because I set a cup down on it in the 2nd year. Howard Pike looked back into the unit. "There's a coffee ring on the floor," he said. Nobody laughed. "Don't say another word," Marisol said quietly and touched Lauren's arm. At 1:31, Curtis Yao got through to Ethan Whitmore, and Ethan listened to 20 seconds of it and then said the single stupidest sentence of his entire life, which was, "That's the best news I've had in a month." "Sir, I want to be careful about how we characterize it as theft. Characterize it as destruction of evidence." She emptied a storage unit after being served with an application to inspect it, Curtis. "Do you understand what that does?" "I understand exactly what it does, which is why I'd like to slow down." "Slow down." Ethan actually laughed. "Curtis, 48 hours ago, I was a man with a bad geotechnical report. Today, I'm a man with a bad geotechnical report and an ex-wife who just committed obstruction in front of a sheriff's deputy. That's not a slowdown. That's a hinge." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Whitmore," Curtis said, "did you have anything to do with those boxes not being there?" "Excuse me. I need to ask it once, and I need a real answer, because if the answer is yes, and I find out on Wednesday from a judge, I'm going to be the 3rd lawyer you lose in a week." "No," Ethan said. "I did not." And that was true, and it was the last completely true sentence he would speak for 11 days. At 2:40, Lauren sat in the front passenger seat of Marisol Vance's car in a storage facility parking lot and looked at her own hands. "Talk," Marisol said. "I don't know. That's not an option. That's the one thing that isn't an option." Marisol turned in her seat. "Lauren, I've been your lawyer for 4 days. On Monday morning, I stood up in front of Priya Raghavan and told her your evidence was clean and your motives were clean, and she believed me. And on Monday afternoon, a court custodian opened a door and found a broom. Do you understand what that costs me? Yes. No, you don't, because you're still doing arithmetic about your mother. So I'll tell you. Marisol's voice was very level. On Wednesday, there will be a show cause hearing. The question will be whether you willfully removed evidence after service. If she finds that you did, she can strike your defenses. She can refer you for contempt, and she can make a spoliation finding that follows you into every proceeding this case ever touches. And the SEC, the lenders, the board, everyone who is starting to look at Ethan Whitmore, they all stop looking at him and start looking at you. That is what an empty room does. Lauren nodded slowly. Who else had access? Nobody. Say it again and think about it. Lauren opened her mouth to say nobody a second time, and then she stopped. Marisol saw it happen. There it is. 5 years ago, Lauren said slowly, when I opened the unit, there's a form, authorized parties, in case something happens to the renter. You listed someone. I listed a second name. Whose? Lauren stared through the windshield. Walter Grant. Marisol closed her eyes. Why? She said. Because if I got hit by a bus, there was exactly one person on this earth who would open those boxes and understand what he was looking at, Lauren said. Not my sister, not a lawyer, him. He was the only one who'd know what the second survey meant. He was the only one who'd know why the side letter was numbered the way it was. Her voice tightened. I did it in a strip mall office in Yonkers on a Tuesday, and I never thought about it again. Does he know you did it? I don't know. You never told him. Marisol. I hadn't spoken to Walter Grant in 3 years until 6 weeks ago. He didn't even know the unit existed until I told him. Then how would he? He wouldn't, Lauren said. He couldn't. They sat there. Call him, Marisol said. At 2:48, Lauren called Walter Grant's cell phone. It rang 8 times and went to a voicemail greeting recorded by a man who sounded 10 years younger than the one she'd sat across from. She called the house. 9 rings. She called the cell again. Lauren. Marisol's hand closed over her wrist. Stop. Not from your phone, not 4 times in a row, not today. If those boxes are gone and it turns out you were calling him 14 times on the afternoon of a court-ordered inventory, that's an exhibit. Lauren set the phone in her lap. He's 74, she said. He filed an affidavit on Friday against a man who had already gone after his wife's heart medication. I know. He hasn't answered his home phone. I know, Marisol said. We're going to do this the right way, which means we're going to be slow and careful, and it's going to feel like nothing is happening. Can you do that? No. Good. At least you're honest. At 4:15, the manager of the storage facility, a man named Ray Delacroix, with forearms like a bricklayer, and the exhausted patience of somebody who had testified in 3 divorces, already printed out an access log while a deputy watched over his shoulder. System logs every code entry, he said. Gate, then the building door, then the floor. Show me the last 90 days, Alvarez said. Ray scrolled. May 10th. That's her 3 hours. 3 hours, Curtis Yao said sharply. People read in there, Ray said. You'd be amazed. Keep going. Then nothing, nothing, nothing. Ray scrolled. Nothing for 2 months and change. Then here. The room went still. Saturday, Ray said. 4:02 in the morning. Gate code, building door, 2nd floor. Out at 5:19. Whose code? Ray looked at the screen for a long moment. That's the secondary, he said. Authorized party. Name on the account is W. Grant. Curtis Yao exhaled the way a man exhales when a case he thought he was losing sits up in bed. Was there a vehicle? Alvarez asked. Cameras on the gate. Pull it. Ray pulled it. The picture was gray and grainy and 40 seconds long, and it showed a sedan coming through the gate at 4:01 in the morning, and it showed the same sedan leaving at 5:20 with the trunk lid riding low. That's a Buick, Alvarez said. Lauren felt the floor tilt. Marisol's hand was on her arm again. Not a word. At 4:50, Curtis Yao called his client from the parking lot, and this time he did not slow anything down. Walter Grant emptied the unit, he said. 4 in the morning on Saturday, on camera, under his own access code. Ethan Whitmore stood in his office on the 39th floor of a building with his name on it and felt for the first time in 6 weeks the specific warm rush of a man who has just been handed a knife. Say that again. Walter Grant, the same man who filed a 9-page affidavit on Friday morning presenting himself as a reluctant witness of conscience, emptied a storage unit full of your documents at 4 a.m. on Saturday. Curtis, yes, that's not a witness anymore, Ethan said softly. That's a conspiracy. That is the argument, yes. 2 people, coordinating, timed around a filing. Ethan was walking now fast, and his voice was climbing. She has a former officer of my company remove records so a court can't inventory them, and then that same officer swears out an affidavit designed to look independent. And every bank in the syndicate has been reading it since Friday, like it came down off a mountain. Mr. Whitmore, I want to caution you. I want it in front of Raghavan Wednesday morning, all of it. The log, the video, the affidavit side by side. We will file it. Carefully. File it however you want, Curtis, just file it. Ethan stopped at the window. And get me a statement out to the syndicate tonight. Absolutely not. Excuse me. You have a board meeting tomorrow morning and a hearing Wednesday. You will not be issuing statements to lenders in between. Curtis's voice was flat. Sir, I've been on this case for a day and a half, and I already know exactly what your problem is, and it isn't the survey. Enlighten me. Your problem is that every single time somebody hands you a good moment, you try to spend it in the next 4 minutes, Curtis said. Sit still, just once. Sit still and let the facts do it. At 5:30, a woman named Ruth Grant called Lauren Hayes from a hospital hallway in White Plains, and her voice was so steady that it took Lauren a full sentence to understand what she was hearing. He collapsed at about 2 o'clock, Ruth said. In the driveway, the mailman found him. Lauren sat down on the stairs outside her apartment. Is he? He's alive. It was cardiac. They've got him upstairs and they say the word stable a lot, which I've learned means they don't know yet. A small breath. I'm calling you because he told me to, about an hour ago, when they let me in for 4 minutes. Ruth, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Don't do that yet, Ruth said. He gave me a message and I want to say it right because he made me repeat it twice, and I want you to understand he was on a gurney with an IV in his hand, making an old woman repeat a sentence back to him. Go ahead. He said, tell Lauren the boxes are exactly where they're supposed to be, and tell her not to say one word about it until she talks to me, and tell her that if I die before she talks to me, the receipt is in the coffee can. Lauren pressed her hand over her eyes. The coffee can. He's got a coffee can in the garage, Ruth said. 41 years I've been married to that man, and I have never once asked him what's in it. Ruth. Yes. Do you know what he did on Saturday? I know he got up at 3 in the morning and told me he was going to be a decent man about something, and that it would take 2 hours, Ruth said. And then he came home at 6:30 and made pancakes, which he does not do, and he sat there and he ate them, and he cried the whole time, and he wouldn't tell me why. So no, I don't know what he did, but I've known him since he was 33, and I know he didn't steal anything. At 6:10, Lauren called Marisol Vance and told her all of it, and there was a very long silence on the line. Coffee can, Marisol said. Coffee can. Lauren, I want you to hear how this sounds. On Wednesday, I am going to stand in front of a federal judge and explain that the boxes were removed at 4 in the morning by a man who is currently intubated in a cardiac unit, and that the explanation is located in a coffee can in his garage. I know, which we cannot go get. Because if you set 1 foot in that garage, you're a woman collecting evidence from a witness's home while a preservation order is live. I know that too. Then here's what we do, Marisol said. Ruth Grant retrieves it. Not you, not me, not anybody who works for me. She does it with her own hands in her own house, and she does it on the phone with a lawyer she hires herself, and I'll pay for that lawyer through a bar referral so nobody can say I directed it. And if she can't find it, then Wednesday is going to be the worst morning of your life, Marisol said. At 7:40 that night, Diane sat on the floor of that small apartment with her back against the wall, while her sister stood at the window with her arms folded and did not turn around. Say something, Diane said. I'm thinking. You've been thinking for 2 hours. I've watched you not blink for 2 hours. Diane. Lauren, I've known you 51 years. When you go quiet like this, you're not thinking. You're rehearsing losing. Diane's voice caught. So say it out loud so I can hear how stupid it sounds. Lauren turned around. Wednesday, a judge is going to decide whether I destroyed evidence, she said. If she decides I did, then everything I've said for 6 weeks becomes the story of a bitter ex-wife, and every bank walks away from the fight and settles quietly, and Harbor Point opens on schedule. That building's got a bad foundation. That building's got 412 residential units, a school on the ground floor, and a completion date somebody forced. Lauren's voice was shaking now. That's what nobody understands. Everybody keeps telling me this is about a marriage. It has not been about a marriage since March 4 years ago. Diane wiped her face with the back of her wrist. And Mom is paid through September. And then I have $53,000 minus whatever this costs and a lawsuit and a job I've missed 6 days of. Lauren laughed, and it was ugly. Patty called today, by the way, from the HVAC company, to fire you. To tell me my desk is still my desk, and that if anybody in a suit comes to her office asking questions about me, she's going to enjoy that thoroughly. Lauren pressed the heel of her hand into her eye. A 63-year-old woman I've known 9 weeks. That's the person standing up for me, Diane. That's who's left. That's not who's left, Diane said. That's who showed up. There's a difference, and you know it. At 8:55, Ruth Grant called back. I've got a lawyer on the other line, she said. Her name is Brenda, and she talks very fast. Ruth, I'm in the garage. I've got the can. Lauren stood up. There's a rubber band around some papers, Ruth said, and a flash drive, and lured a photograph of the two of us at somebody's wedding in about 1988. Ruth, the papers. I'm reading, honey. Hold on. It's a form. A rustle. It says United States Securities and Exchange Commission at the top, Office of the Whistleblower. Lauren's knees went. Read the rest. It says Form TCR, tip complaint or referral. Ruth's voice slowed. There's a submission number and a date stamp. And under it there's a second page, and this one's a receipt from something called an evidence intake desk at a federal building on Broad Street, and it lists a delivery date of Saturday, and it says, and I'm reading it exactly, 10 sealed cartons. Lauren didn't hear the last 2 words for about 4 seconds. Her brain had stopped at the first sentence. Saturday, she said. He drove them straight there. That's what it looks like. Ruth was there, a name on that form. Whose submission is it? Paper turning. Walter Allen Grant, Ruth said. Just his. Just his. There's a handwritten note stapled to the back, Ruth said. It's his writing. You want it. Please. Ruth Grant read it out loud in a hospital parking lot to a woman 90 miles away, and her voice only broke once. It says Lauren, filed under my name alone, and my name is the only one on it. Not because I want the credit. Because if your name is on a whistleblower submission, then the first thing a good defense lawyer does is stand up and say, she did it for the money. And the last thing this needs is a reason for anybody to talk about money. I have a pension and a wife and 11 good years behind me. You have 30 ahead of you. Let me carry this one. I've been waiting 3 years for something heavy enough to be worth my hands. Walter. At 9:40, Marisol Vance stopped her car in the middle of a residential street to read a photograph of that receipt on her phone, and then she said one word that Lauren had never heard her say. Marisol. Sorry. A breath. Lauren, do you understand what happened on Saturday? He gave the boxes to the SEC. He didn't just give them to the SEC. He created a federal chain of custody at 4 a.m, 72 hours before your ex-husband asked a judge to seize them. Marisol's voice was climbing. There is no spoliation. There is the opposite of spoliation. Those documents are more preserved right now than they have ever been in 5 years, and the entity holding them is the one entity in America that Whitmore Global cannot subpoena, cannot pressure, and cannot buy lunch for. So Wednesday, Curtis Yao is going to stand up with a gate log and a grainy Buick, and he's going to build the most beautiful conspiracy theory you've ever heard, and I'm going to let him build all of it, and then I'm going to hand the court a federal intake receipt. Marisol laughed once sharp. Lauren, that man had a heart attack on Monday. If he'd had it on Friday, those boxes would still be sitting in Yonkers on Monday morning when a judge said inventory them, and every single page would have gone into a court file that opposing counsel reads. Lauren pressed her hand against her mouth. He knew, she said. Of course he knew. He was a CFO for 9 years. He knew what an impoundment motion looks like before it's filed. He watched them start circling, and he moved. Marisol. Lauren's voice had gone strange. The receipt says 10 cartons. What? 10 sealed cartons. There was a pause. How many did you have? 9, Lauren said. There were 9 boxes in that unit, 3 across 3 high. There have been 9 boxes for 2 years. At 10:15, Ethan Whitmore sat alone in his apartment with a glass he had poured and not touched, and he called Gil Braddock. I need to know something, and I need you to tell me the truth, even if the truth is bad for you. Go ahead. Did you enter that storage unit? No. Gil. Ethan, I want you to hear this clearly because I'm about to stop working for you, and I'd like to leave without a misunderstanding. Braddock's voice was perfectly calm. I found the unit. I gave you the number. That's the whole job. I have never cut a lock in my life, and I've been doing this 31 years, and the reason I've been doing it 31 years is that I've never once done the thing my clients wanted me to do at 11 o'clock at night. You're quitting. I'm resigning, which is the polite version, and I'm sending you an invoice for $4,000, and I'm not sending you anything else. A pause. You want some free advice? No. You're getting some. Whatever's about to happen to you tomorrow in that board meeting, don't walk in there and tell them about the Buick. Ethan sat forward. Why not? Because you're going to walk in there wanting to talk about a conspiracy, and they're going to want to talk about a building, Braddock said. And every minute you spend on her is a minute they spend deciding you can't be saved. Ethan hung up on him. Then he sat there for a long time, and at 11 o'clock at night, he did the thing he'd been circling for 2 hours, which was open the file on his phone that still had her name in it and look at it and not press it. He had rehearsed 40 versions of what he'd say. In every one of them, she cried at some point. He put the phone face down. At 6:50 the next morning, Gordon Ray was already in the boardroom of Whitmore Global Holdings when Ethan came through the door, and there were 8 chairs, and 6 of them were full at an hour when nobody in that building had ever been in that room. You're early, Ethan said. We're all early, Gordon said. That should tell you something. Gordon. Sit down, son. Ethan sat. I want to say one thing before the others come in, and I want to say it as a man who wrote you a check when you were 31 and had nothing but a mouth. Gordon folded his hands. I have loved you, not liked, loved. Your father was my friend for 40 years, and when he died, I made you a promise at his grave that I have kept in ways you will never know about. I know that. You don't. But that's all right. Gordon nodded slowly. So here's what I need from you at 9 o'clock. When they ask you about that email, you're going to say yes. Gordon, that email is being taken out of... Ethan? The old man's voice didn't rise, and it didn't have to. I have read it. Sit on it. Those are your words. There isn't a context in this world that turns sit on it into something else. He leaned forward. You say yes, and you say you were wrong, and you offer your resignation as chief executive before they take it, and you walk out of here with a chance at a life. Or you fight me, and I will remove you, and you will spend the next 4 years explaining yourself to people who bill by the hour. Ethan stared at the table. And if the survey's wrong, he said quietly, what, the second survey? If it's wrong, Gordon, if the soil's fine, if I sit on it and get proven right in 18 months... Gordon Ray closed his eyes for a moment. That, he said, is the sound of a man who still thinks this is about being right. At 8:40, Lauren Hayes walked into the lobby of a building she had walked into 100 times, and every single person at the security desk knew exactly who she was. Corbin Hale was standing by the elevators. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. Legally, you absolutely don't. Redgate has a seat in that room as a prospective purchaser of the Northbridge position. I can present the whole thing. Nobody in there needs you standing at the front of a room getting looked at. Corbin. Lauren adjusted the strap of a bag that held one folder. For 12 years, I sat in the second row at events in this building while men explained my own work back to me. Twice I sat in that boardroom while Ethan presented numbers I built the night before and called them ours in a way that meant his. She looked at the elevator doors. I'm not going up there to win anything. I'm going up there because I have never once been the person who said it. They're going to be hostile. Good, she said. Hostile means they're listening. At 9:04, the doors of the boardroom opened, and Lauren Hayes walked in. Nobody expected her. That was the thing. Gordon Ray had put Redgate on the agenda as a lender-side presentation and had not put a name to it, and so 8 people at a table turned and saw a woman in a plain gray coat with one folder, and the room made a sound, an actual sound, a kind of collective intake. Ethan Whitmore came half out of his chair. Absolutely not. Sit down, Gordon said. Gordon, she is an adverse party in active litigation against this company. She cannot be in this room. She's here as counterparty support for a party that holds $415 million of our paper, Gordon said. Counsel has cleared it. Sit down. Ethan sat down. He did not stop looking at her. Not once for the next 31 minutes. Lauren set the folder on the table and did not open it. Good morning, she said. My name is Lauren Hayes. Most of you have met me at a party. Somebody at the far end of the table laughed once and immediately regretted it. I'm not going to talk about my marriage, and I'm going to ask you not to either, because it's the least relevant thing in this room, and it's the only thing anybody wants to discuss. She looked around the table. I'm going to talk about a completion date. Ms. Hayes, said a woman named Priscilla Doyle, who chaired the audit committee and had voted with Ethan on everything for 6 years. Before you do, are you the source of the Northbridge inquiry? No. Then who is? The Northbridge inquiry originated from a credit committee at an institution that holds 11% of the syndicate, Lauren said. That committee asked which entity holds the completion guarantee, because that is a question a lender is entitled to ask, and because nobody had asked it in 4 years. And how did that question get in front of that committee? I asked a friend to ask it. The room shifted. So you did initiate it, Priscilla said. I initiated a question, Lauren said. I want everyone here to be very clear on that because it's going to matter later. I didn't leak a document. I didn't call a reporter. I didn't tell a bank what the answer was. I asked one person to ask one question that a lender already had the right to ask, and the entire structure of this company's largest project failed because nobody could survive the answer. She let that sit. That's not sabotage. That's a load test. At the end of the table, Ethan spoke and his voice was low and had something raw underneath it. You did this. Every head turned. Lauren looked at him for the first time since she'd walked in. No, she said. I simply stopped protecting the choices you made. The room went absolutely silent. You want to know what I actually did for 12 years, she said. And now she was speaking only to him, and everybody in that room knew it, and nobody stopped it. I read everything that came into our home, every quarterly, every projection, every draft. And when I found a problem, I didn't hand it to a lender or a lawyer or a reporter. I handed it to you, across a kitchen counter, at 11 o'clock at night, every single time. Lauren, March 4 years ago, Meridian Bay, I told you that you were personally guaranteeing a completion date you couldn't hit. That's not... And you laughed and kissed my forehead and said, Sweetheart, you're reading things you don't understand. Her voice didn't rise. It just got very clear. Do you know what I did after that? I didn't go to a bank? I went and learned it better for 4 years, so that when the day came that you needed help, I would be able to give it to you in a form you couldn't dismiss. Gordon Ray put both hands flat on the table and looked at the ceiling. And then in June, Lauren said, you stood in a hallway on the 4th floor of a courthouse and said my mother's name out loud so I would have to look at your face while you did it. Ethan's jaw moved. That's not what happened. Marcus Delaney heard it. A court officer named Anthony Serrano heard it and swore to it, and your own lawyers put it in a pleading 9 days ago as evidence that I had a motive. Lauren finally opened the folder, took out a single sheet, and slid it down the length of the table. Paragraph 41. Read it out loud, Priscilla, if you want. Read what 41 lawyers thought was a clever thing to write about an 81-year-old woman with dementia. Priscilla Doyle looked at the page for about 6 seconds and then put it face down on the table. I'd rather not, she said. At 9:21, Lauren Hayes laid out the rest in 11 minutes with no notes. She walked them through the original geotechnical survey and the revised one and the 11-month extension that Walter Grant had recommended in writing. She walked them through the side letter that moved the completion guarantee from the project entity to the parent, which meant that a missed date did not cost them a hole in the ground. It cost them every subsidiary and every fund with the name Whitmore on it. She walked them through what happens when 11 institutions read the same 90 pages in the same week, which is not a renegotiation, which is an exit. And then she said the sentence that changed the room. And on Saturday morning at 4 a.m., Walter Grant delivered 10 sealed cartons of documents to the evidence intake desk of the Securities and Exchange Commission in Lower Manhattan under a whistleblower submission filed in his name alone. Curtis Yao, standing against the back wall, actually said, "Wait," out loud. Ethan Whitmore didn't move at all. "So I want to correct something before this board votes on anything," Lauren said. "Tomorrow morning in front of Judge Raghavan, this company is going to argue that I destroyed evidence. I want every director in this room to know today, before you can claim you didn't, that the evidence in question is in a federal building on Broad Street, has been since Saturday, and has a stamped intake receipt." She closed the folder. "You are about to accuse a woman of obstruction for something that is in fact the most thoroughly documented act of preservation any of you will ever see, and you're going to do it in writing." Gordon Ray turned his head slowly toward Curtis Yao. "Did you know that—" "I found out 90 seconds ago, same as you," Curtis said. "Then I suggest," Gordon said, "that whatever you were planning to file tomorrow, you don't." At 9:52, the board of Whitmore Global Holdings began voting. They did not remove him. Not that morning. That was the part nobody outside the room ever understood afterward. And it was the part Ethan understood least of all. They didn't fire him because firing him in the middle of a lender panic would have accelerated the very thing they were trying to slow. What they did was worse. They voted 7-1 to establish a special committee with full authority over Harbor Point, chaired by Priscilla Doyle, reporting to Gordon Ray. They voted 7-1 to retain independent counsel and a forensic accounting firm with unrestricted access. They voted 7-1 to suspend all executive authority over the foundation and its disbursements, effective immediately, and to reinstate every disbursement suspended in the past 90 days, pending review. Lauren's hands went numb at that one. She kept her face perfectly still, and they voted 8-0, with Ethan Whitmore voting for it himself, because Gordon Ray looked at him and he understood he had exactly one card left to instruct all outside counsel to withdraw any pending motion characterizing the removal of the documents as destruction. "Motion carries," Gordon said. Ethan sat in the chair he had sat in for 11 years at the head of a table he had bought in a building with his name on it, and he was functionally a man with a badge. "There's one more item," Priscilla said. "Redgate." "That's mine," Corbin Hale said, standing. "Northbridge is exiting. We're prepared to acquire their position at a number that will make everyone in this room feel ill, and we're prepared to close in 11 days. And I'll be direct about the condition, because I don't enjoy the other way." "Say it," Gordon said. "The condition is that Harbor Point construction stops today, pending independent verification of the foundation," Corbin said. "Not slows, stops. And that every family that signed a purchase contract on that building gets a letter this week telling them why." The room made a noise. "Do you understand what that letter does to our valuation?" someone said. "I understand exactly what it does," Corbin said. "I've modeled it. It costs about $400 million. He picked up his coat. "I'd like somebody in this room to say out loud what the other version costs, because that building has 412 units and a school on the ground floor, and I've been in this business 31 years, and I have never once, not one time, seen a company get in trouble for stopping." At 10:40 in a hallway outside that boardroom, Ethan Whitmore caught up to his ex-wife. "Lauren." She stopped, but she didn't turn all the way around. "I want to ask you one question," he said. "Ask it." "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked in the middle of it, and it was the first honest sound she had heard from him in years. "About the SEC, about Grant. Why let me walk in there and get taken apart in front of Gordon when you could have called me Sunday night and I would have—" "You would have what?" He stopped. "You would have called Ruth Grant's insurance administrator again," Lauren said. That's what you would have done. That's what you did do, Ethan. On a Thursday afternoon to a woman with a bad heart over $1,100 of medication. I told Braddock not to touch it. You told Braddock not to touch it after you told him what it was, Lauren said. That's not restraint. That's just wanting it done without your fingerprints. He looked at the floor. He's in a cardiac unit, she said quietly. Walter, since 2 o'clock Monday. Ethan's head came up fast. What? He drove 9 boxes to a federal building at 4 in the morning at 74 years old, and then he came home and made pancakes and cried, and 48 hours later, his heart quit. Her voice finally shook. And you want to know why I didn't call you Sunday night? Lauren, I know you didn't, she said. That's the whole tragedy of you, Ethan. You never do. You just create the conditions and then you're surprised. She walked to the elevator, and at 10:51 that morning, standing in that hallway, her phone rang with a number that started with 212 and that she did not recognize. Ms. Hayes, my name is Adayeze Okorie. I'm a senior counsel in the Division of Enforcement at the SEC. I'm calling about a submission filed on Saturday by a Mr. Walter Grant. Yes. I'll be brief because I understand you have counsel, and I'd like you to have her present for anything substantive. A pause. But I have one preliminary question I'd like to ask you right now informally, and you're free to decline. Go ahead. Mr. Grant's intake receipt lists 10 sealed cartons, the attorney said. 9 of them contain project records consistent with his declaration. The 10th doesn't. Lauren stood very still. What's in the 10th? Ms. Hayes, Adayeze Okorie said, the 10th carton is full of internal documents from this company that post-date your divorce by 4 weeks. Somebody put them in there after you'd already left, and it wasn't Walter Grant. Lauren stood in that hallway on the 39th floor with the phone against her ear and made herself breathe before she answered. Ms. Okorie, I'm going to stop you, she said. Not because I don't want to help. Because my lawyer told me that the next time a stranger asked me a preliminary question, I should hang up and call her, and she used language I won't repeat. That's the correct instinct, Adayeze Okorie said. For what it's worth, it's also what I'd have told you. Then let me ask you one thing instead, and you can decline. Go ahead. How do you know it wasn't Walter? There was a pause on the line. Because at 4:51 on Saturday morning, Mr. Grant stood at our intake desk and told the duty officer unprompted that 9 cartons were his and 1 was not, Adayeze said. He asked that the 10th be logged separately. He said, and the officer wrote it down verbatim, that a man handed it to him in a parking garage 40 minutes earlier, and that he had not opened it and did not intend to. Lauren put her free hand flat against the wall. A man, she said. That's all he said. And Ms. Hayes, I'd like him to say more, but I'm told he's not currently in a position to. At 11:10, Marisol Vance answered on the first ring and listened to the whole thing without a sound, and then she said, "Oh, that's a problem." Which part? All of it, but start with this. Until we know who put that carton together, we don't know what's in it. And until we know what's in it, we don't know whether the entire submission is clean. Marisol was moving. Lauren could hear a door. If somebody dropped privileged attorney-client material into that box, then a very good defense lawyer stands up in 6 months and says the government's evidence is tainted, and everything Walter Grant did at 4 in the morning gets argued about for 2 years instead of acted on. So somebody could have poisoned it on purpose. Somebody could have. Or somebody could have handed a 74-year-old man the bravest box of his life at 4 in the morning. Marisol exhaled. That's the thing about anonymous gifts, Lauren. They come in exactly 2 flavors, and they look identical from the outside. At 11:40, Curtis Yao filed a 2-page withdrawal of the motion for impoundment, and at 11:52, Judge Priya Raghavan's clerk called both counsel and told them the Wednesday hearing was going forward anyway. On what? Curtis said. Her Honor didn't say, the clerk said. She said to bring the gate log. At 2 that afternoon, Ethan Whitmore sat in his office with the door closed and called Dominic Reyes, and Dominic did not pick up. He called again. He called a 3rd time, and on the 3rd try, Dominic answered and said, I'm in a meeting. You're not in a meeting. I'm in a meeting, Ethan. Dominic. Ethan leaned back. 10 cartons went into a federal building on Saturday. 9 of them are Walter Grant's. 1 of them isn't. And the one that isn't is full of documents from this company dated after June. Silence. So that's an inside job, Ethan said. That's somebody on my floor. And I'm going through it in my head, and I keep landing on the same handful of people, and you're one of them. That's flattering. Is it you? Are you asking me as my boss or as a man who's about to be one? Ethan sat forward. What does that mean? It means I've worked for you 8 years, and you have never once called me at 2 p.m. and asked me a question you didn't already know the answer to, Dominic said. So no, it's not me. And Ethan, before you call the next person on your list, take a beat and think about how many people you're about to accuse in a building where everybody's already got a lawyer. He hung up first. Ethan sat there and did the thing he had been doing all week, which was replay a conversation 4 seconds after it ended and hear all the parts he'd missed. Dominic Reyes had not laughed once. At 3:15, Rachel Okonjo took a call in her kitchen in Queens with a legal pad in front of her. Ms. Okonjo, this is Marisol Vance. I represent Lauren Hayes. Your attorney gave me your number and she's on the line. I'm here, a woman said. Then let me ask the question fast because I have 20 hours. Marisol's voice was crisp. 10 cartons went to Broad Street on Saturday. Did you make one of them? Rachel Okonjo said no. Do you know who did? There was a pause that lasted 4 seconds, and every person on that call heard it. Rachel, her attorney said. I don't know, Rachel said. That's the true answer. I don't know. But, Marisol said. But on Thursday afternoon, somebody printed 940 pages off the shared drive on the color device outside the acquisitions bullpen, Rachel said. I know that because I still had operations dashboards on my phone until they killed my access Friday morning, and print volume on that device is a line item because we bill it back to project codes. 940 pages, Marisol repeated, on a Thursday afternoon at a machine nobody uses because it jams. Billed to what project code? That's the part, Rachel said. None. Somebody keyed the override. There are 4 people on that floor who have the override, and one of them was me, and I was in a conference room getting told my badge was being deactivated. At 4:10 in a hospital in White Plains, Ruth Grant sat beside a bed and told her husband, who had been awake for 40 minutes and was not allowed to have his glasses yet, that a lawyer wanted to ask him one question. Then let her ask it, Walter said. His voice sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. Mr. Grant, my name is Marisol Vance. I need to know who handed you the 10th box. Walter took a long time. Didn't see a face, he said. Garage under the building on Broad Level 2. I pulled in at 10:04, and there was a car sitting there with the engine off, and a fella got out and walked up, and I thought, well, this is how it ends? They've come for the boxes. And he set a carton on my hood and said, put this in with yours, and I said, who are you? And he said, somebody who's on the paper. Walter breathed. And I said, if it's stolen, I'm not carrying it. And he said, it's not stolen. Every page of it is a document I either wrote or was CC'd on. Lauren, on mute, pressed her hand over her mouth. Anything else, Marisol said. He said one more thing. Walter's voice thinned. He said, tell them I'm sorry, it took me 8 years. At 4:31, Marisol Vance called Corbin Hale. How many people at Whitmore Global have been there 8 years and have a print override? Why are you asking me? Because you've spent 5 weeks reading their org chart like a hymnal. Corbin was quiet a moment. 1. At 6 that evening, Lauren Hayes sat on the floor of her apartment with a cup of tea she hadn't touched, and Diane came in without knocking and put a grocery bag on the counter. You look like a woman who found out something. Dominic Reyes. Who's that? He's the one who laughed, Lauren said. 12 years of dinners, and every single time Ethan said something, Dominic laughed within half a second. I used to sit at the other end of the table and think, that man doesn't have a spine, he's got a spring. And he printed 940 pages on a broken copier on a Thursday afternoon and drove them to a federal building at 4 a.m. and handed them to a stranger. Lauren finally looked up, and her eyes were wet. Diane, I was so sure I knew who everybody was. I had them all sorted. 12 years of watching people from the second row, And I had a whole list in my head of who was good and who wasn't, and it turns out my list was garbage. Diane sat down across from her. Was Ethan on the good side of it? That's the worst part, Lauren said. For about 9 years, yes. At 8:50 on Wednesday morning, Judge Priya Raghavan took the bench, looked at the 2 tables in front of her, and said, Mr. Yao, you withdrew your motion at 11:40 yesterday morning. Tell me why I'm here. Curtis Yao stood. Your Honor, the withdrawal was voluntary, and it was made promptly upon receiving information. Upon receiving information that the boxes you accused this woman of destroying had been sitting in a federal evidence room since 4:51 Saturday morning. Yes, Your Honor. And when did your client learn that Tuesday morning at approximately 9:40? And when did your client learn that a man named Walter Grant had accessed the unit? Curtis Yao hesitated for exactly the length of a heartbeat. Monday afternoon at approximately 4:50. So for roughly 17 hours, the judge said, your client possessed a gate log, a videotape, and a theory, and did not possess a single fact about where those documents actually were. And during those 17 hours, he directed you to prepare a filing accusing the respondent of obstruction. Your Honor, the filing was never made. It was never made, Judge Raghavan agreed. That's the only reason we're having a conversation instead of a proceeding. She took off her glasses. Ms. Vance, is your client prepared to make a representation on the record about her knowledge of the removal? Marisol stood. She is, Your Honor, and she'd like to make it personally. Ms. Hayes. Lauren stood up. I did not know, she said. I found out on Monday night at 9:05 from Mr. Grant's wife, who was standing in a hospital parking lot at the time. Before that moment, I believed those documents had been stolen, and I want the court to know that I spent about 6 hours on Monday believing I had lost the only thing I had. Thank you, the judge said. Sit down. She wrote something. Here's where we are. There will be no spoliation finding because there was no spoliation, and I want that sentence in the transcript in a form that can be read out loud in other buildings. She looked up. Mr. Yao, I'm entering a preservation order that runs against your client, not against Ms. Hayes. Whitmore Global Holdings will preserve all documents, all devices, all communications, and Mr. Yao all print logs effective immediately. Your Honor. And I'm scheduling a status conference in 30 days, she said. Mr. Yao, if between now and then this court receives any filing from your client that references this woman's mother in any capacity other than a medical emergency, I will read it very slowly out loud in open court, and then I will decide what to do about it. The gavel came down at 9:09. In the hallway afterward, Ethan Whitmore stood by a window with his hands in his pockets and watched his ex-wife walk toward the elevators, surrounded by 3 people, and it took him a moment to identify the feeling in his chest, because he had not felt it since he was maybe 22. He was watching somebody who had people. At 11:20 that morning, the Special Committee's forensic accountants took over a conference room on 37, and a woman named Priscilla Doyle, who had voted with Ethan on everything for 6 years, walked into his office without knocking and set down a single sheet of paper. What's this? That's your calendar for the next 4 weeks, she said. It's blank. Priscilla, every meeting you had is now a meeting I have. Every call you had is now a call I have. And Ethan, this is not a hostile act. This is a legally required act, so I'd appreciate it if you'd stop looking at me like I stole something. You did steal something. I inherited something, Priscilla said, which is worse because I have to fix it. She turned to go, then stopped. Can I say one thing off the record? Since when do you talk off the record? Since Tuesday morning. She turned back. I sat in that room and I heard a woman describe standing in a courthouse hallway while her husband said her mother's name to make her flinch. And I want you to know that I didn't vote against you because of the survey. Then why? Because I have a mother too, Priscilla said. And because for 6 years I told myself that the reason I always voted with you was that you were usually right. And it took 11 minutes on Tuesday to find out I'd just been scared of you. At 2:40 that afternoon, an independent geotechnical firm out of New Jersey began drilling verification borings at Harbor Point under the supervision of 2 engineers who had never heard of Ethan Whitmore, and by 4 they had stopped, and by 4:15, the lead engineer, a woman named Sonia Bristow, was on the phone with Priscilla Doyle. I need you to understand that this is preliminary, she said. Understood. We've got 3 borings in, and I'm not going to give you numbers today. But I'll tell you what I told my own partner 10 minutes ago, which is that whoever wrote the original survey was not lying. He was just early. Meaning the material we're pulling at 14 to 22 feet on the eastern half is not what's in the design assumptions, Sonia said. It's what's in the revised survey. The revised survey is right. Priscilla Doyle sat down. How bad? Ms. Doyle, I'm going to say a sentence and I need you not to repeat it as a conclusion because I don't have one yet. A pause. If that building had opened on the original schedule with the original foundation design, I don't think it falls down. I think it settles. Differentially, over about a decade. And I think somewhere in year 6 or 7, somebody notices the doors on the east side don't close right, and then it becomes the most expensive thing anybody in this conversation has ever seen. And people living in it. 412 units, Sonia said, and a school. At 5:10, Priscilla Doyle walked into Ethan Whitmore's office for the second time that day and did not sit down. The revised survey is right, she said. Ethan didn't move. Say something. How many borings? 3. 3 borings on a 9-acre site. Ethan. Her voice went flat. Do you hear yourself? I just told you the thing you spent 3 years hoping wasn't true, and your first sentence is a sample-size objection. It's a reflex, Priscilla said. That's all it is. It's the same reflex that told a man to sit on a report because in February it'd be somebody else's problem. She put both hands on the back of the chair. I've known you 11 years. Somewhere in there is a person who's about to be sick, and I'd honestly rather deal with him. Ethan looked at the window for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, The school opens in the ground floor unit in 19 months. Yes. My niece was going to go there. Priscilla stopped. What? My sister's kid, Delia. She's 4. Ethan's voice did something strange in the middle of the word 4. Nadine put her name on the list in March. I told her to. I told her it'd be the best pre-K in the borough and that I'd get her a discount on a unit upstairs. Neither of them said anything for a while. Well, Priscilla said finally, there it is. At 7 that night, Ethan Whitmore drove himself to a hospital in White Plains, which he had not driven himself anywhere in 9 years. Ruth Grant was in the hallway with a paper cup of coffee, and she saw him coming from 30 feet away and did not stand up. You've got some nerve, she said. I know. Do you know, though, because a man who knew would have stopped in the parking lot. She looked up at him. 41 years I've been married to that man, and I have watched him carry your company on his back through 2 recessions and a bypass, and you gave him a bowl. Mrs. Grant, Ruth, you've eaten at my table. You called me Ruth for 9 years, and then you stopped, and I noticed the exact month you stopped, and so did he. Ethan stood there and took it. Somebody called my insurance, Ruth said. I know. Was it you? Yes. She stared at him. I didn't call them personally, Ethan said. A man who worked for me called them because I told him what my leverage was, and then I told him not to use it, and I went to bed feeling like I'd done something decent. That's the truth, and it's uglier than the version where I did it myself. Ruth Grant set down her coffee. Why are you here? Because I found out today that a report I buried is accurate, Ethan said, and because I've been sitting in an office for 11 hours trying to think of one person alive who would tell me the truth about what happens next, and the only name I could come up with is lying in that room. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, 4 minutes, and if his numbers move, I'll have you thrown out by a nurse who benches more than you do. Walter Grant's eyes were open when Ethan came in. He looked at him for a while. Huh, Walter said. Hi, Walter. You look terrible. So do you. I've got an excuse. Walter's hand moved slightly on the blanket. Sit down, you're making me tired. Ethan sat. 3 borings came back, he said. You were right. I know I was right. I was right in November of that year. That's the part nobody understands, Ethan. It wasn't a close call. It was never a close call. If it had been a close call, I'd have let it go, because I'd have been able to live with 50-50. You could have gone over my head. I could have. You could have gone to Gordon. I could have. Why didn't you? Walter Grant looked at the ceiling. Because I was 61 years old and I had 11 months to a full pension, and my wife's cardiologist was in network, he said. That's the whole reason. There's no better one. People want there to be a better one. Ethan pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. I told a man to look at your insurance, he said. I know. How do you know? Because the day I got that call, I said to Ruth, well, there he is, Walter said. Ethan, I've known you since you were 31. I know exactly what you do when you're frightened. You reach for the softest thing in the room. He breathed. You did it to me, and you did it to her mother, and I want you to hear something, and then I want you to go home because I'm tired. Go ahead. The freeze, Walter said. What about it? Everybody thinks that was the cruelty. All the lawyers, all the banks that judge. They think the story is a rich man froze his wife's accounts. Walter turned his head slowly. It isn't. The accounts were a Tuesday. You'd have done that to anybody. The thing you did that you can't come back from is that for 4 years you kept a woman at your table because she couldn't be made to testify, and you let her believe it was a marriage. Ethan didn't answer. Did she tell you she found out? No. Somebody did, Walter said. She's known about 2 weeks. You want to know how I know she's known 2 weeks? How? Because 2 weeks ago, she stopped asking me whether there was any version where you weren't like this, Walter said. She'd asked me that question on and off for 5 years, and then one day she didn't. At 9:20 that night, Lauren Hayes drove Diane's car 40 minutes to Ridgeline Memory Care because visiting hours ran until 10 and because she had not been in 3 weeks and could not stand it another day. Her mother was in the chair by the window with a blanket across her knees. Hi, Mom. Eileen Hayes looked up. Oh, she said, there's the serious one. Lauren sat down on the bed and took her mother's hand. They said you had oatmeal. They put cinnamon in it. I've been telling them for years. Eileen's eyes drifted. Is it Sunday? It's Wednesday. That's all right. Her mother patted her hand. You look thin. Are you eating? Is your husband feeding you? Lauren held very still. I'm not married anymore, Mom. Since when? Since June. Eileen Hayes considered this the way she considered most things now, with a kind of polite curiosity about a country she'd once lived in. Was he mean to you? Yes, Lauren said. Well, her mother nodded slowly. Good. Then you did the right thing. I always say if he's mean, you go. You do always say that. Because your father was mean for about a year in 1974, and I put him out on the porch, Eileen said perfectly clearly, and then she looked at the window and said, Is it Sunday? Lauren sat in that room for 50 minutes and did not tell her mother that she had wired $38,100 from an account in Poughkeepsie, or that a board of directors had voted to turn the money back on, or that she had spent 2 hours on Tuesday night on the phone with Diane arguing about whether taking it back made her a hypocrite. She had said, I don't want a dime of that man's money. And Diane had said, it's not his money, it's a foundation, and it's not for you. It's for a woman who put a mean man on a porch in 1974. And if your pride costs Mom that window, I will never forgive you. And Lauren had said nothing for a while, and then she had said, okay. At 6:15 on Thursday morning, Gordon Ray called Ethan and told him to come to his house in Rye, and Ethan understood from the address that it was over. The old man was in the kitchen in a cardigan. Sit. Gordon, sit and let me talk first because I've been up since 3 putting it in order, and if you interrupt me, I'll lose it. Ethan sat. The special committee gets the borings tomorrow, Gordon said. By Monday, there'll be a letter going to 412 families, and by the end of next week, the Division of Enforcement is going to send this company something in an envelope, and after that, everything anybody says out loud gets said through a lawyer. I know. So this is the last conversation you and I get to have as ourselves. Ethan looked at the table. I'm going to tell you something, Gordon said, and I have been deciding for about 4 years whether I'd ever say it, and I've decided I'd rather be the one than let you read it in a deposition. Okay? Your father did this, Gordon said. Ethan's head came up. What? 1989, 11 acres in New Rochelle. There was a report and he put it in a drawer, and the deal closed. And 8 months later, it cost him about $4 million, and it nearly cost him more than that. Gordon's hands were folded. And I sat in a room with 2 other men, and we made it go away. We restructured it. We ate the loss. We called it a market correction. And your father shook my hand and cried. And then he went home and never told his wife or his son. Ethan couldn't speak. He was a good man for the next 22 years, Gordon said. Genuinely. Some men only need to be caught once. But I'm going to tell you the part that keeps me up, which is that when you were 31 and you came to me with a mouth and a pitch deck, I wrote you a check for $8 million. And I did it because of your father, and I never told you the story. Why not? Because I thought I was protecting his memory. Gordon's voice finally cracked just once. But that's not what I was doing. I was protecting my own comfort. And so you grew up thinking your old man was a genius who never missed. And every time you got scared and reached for the drawer, there was nobody in your head saying this is exactly where he went wrong and here's what it cost. Ethan sat with that a long time. You could have told me any year, he said. Any year, Gordon. 12 of them. Yes. You could have told me in March 4 years ago. Yes. You could have told me instead of writing the check. Yes, Gordon Ray said. And that's why I'm telling you in my kitchen instead of a boardroom. Because I'm not here as your chairman. I'm here as the second largest reason you're sitting in that chair. Ethan pushed back from the table and stood at the window with his back to the room. What do you want me to do? I want you to resign as chief executive by close of business Friday, and I want you to sign the tolling agreement council is sending you, and I want you to stop today for the rest of your life calling anybody about anybody's insurance. Gordon stood. And Ethan. What? You're going to want to call her. Ethan didn't turn around. Don't do it this week, Gordon said. This week it's still about you. At 11 that morning, in a conference room at Vance and Aldrich Marisol, Vance closed a laptop and said, I want to talk about the 10th carton. Adaize Okoria's voice came through the speaker. Go ahead. You've had it a week. Somebody's inventoried it. Somebody has. Is it privileged? Ms. Vance, I'm not asking you to characterize the contents. I'm asking whether your team has walled anything off, because if they have, then somebody handed a whistleblower a booby trap, and I'd like to know if I'm dealing with a hero or a bomb. There was a silence. There were 14 documents in that carton that went to a filter team, Adaize said. They're out. They're gone. They're not part of any analysis, and they never were. And the other 900 pages. The other 900 pages, Adaize said carefully, are what I would describe as a person's complete file on themselves. Lauren, sitting at the end of the table, leaned forward. Say that again. Ms. Hayes, I've been doing this 17 years, and there's a genre I've come to recognize. Somebody who is frightened over a long period keeps a copy of everything they were ever told to do. A pause. It's usually the most useful thing we ever get, and it's almost always made by somebody who never intended to use it. They make it so that if the day ever comes, they can prove they were only carrying the message. And then one day they get tired, Marisol said. And then one day they get tired, Adaize agreed. At 1:40 that afternoon, Lauren Hayes sent a text message to a number Corbin Hale had given her, and it said 7 words. I know it was you. Thank you. Dominic Reyes did not answer for 2 hours. Then he wrote back, and the message was long, and Lauren read it standing up in a break room at an HVAC company in a strip mall, because she had gone back to work that morning, and Patty had put a coffee in front of her without a word. It said, I laughed at every joke that man ever made. I laughed at jokes about you. I want you to know that I remember specific ones. I remember a dinner where he said you'd been to more openings than a surgeon, and everybody laughed, and I laughed the loudest because I was closest. In March, I got a call from a bank about the completion schedule, and I read them the language he gave me, and afterward I sat in my car for an hour, and that's when I started printing. Not to be brave, to have proof, I was told. Then Rachel sent the survey on Wednesday, and I understood that in about 6 weeks, there would be a room where everybody explains what they knew, and I did not want the honest version of my life to be that I laughed. I'm not a good man. I'm just a man who got tired 4 years late. Please don't write back. Lauren read it 3 times. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went back to her desk and reconciled invoices for 2 hours, and Patty leaned in the doorway around 4 and said, You've been crying. A little. Somebody die. No, Lauren said. Somebody told the truth. Huh, Patty said. Sit down before you fall down. I've seen the second one drop people harder. At 9:40 on Friday morning, Ethan Whitmore signed a 2-paragraph resignation letter as Chief Executive Officer of Whitmore Global Holdings and remained for the moment a director and the largest single shareholder, which is a sentence lawyer's right when they want a story to have a soft cover. The press release went out at 11. By 11:32, of the 5 reporters who covered the sector had called Lauren Hayes' cell phone, which meant her number was out, which meant a woman living above a hardware store started getting calls from strangers. At noon, Marisol Vance called and said, "Don't answer anything. Not one word, not even no comment in a friendly voice." I wasn't going to. I know. I'm saying it because in about 6 days somebody's going to offer you money for the story, and it's going to be a real number. How real? Real enough that I want you to hear my voice in your head when it happens, Marisol said. Lauren, you're about to become the most attractive interview in American business for approximately 3 weeks, and every single dollar of it costs you the only thing you actually have. Which is what? That you never took the dime, Marisol said. That's it. That's the whole asset. 2 years from now, when a defense lawyer stands up and says this was a bitter ex-wife, the only sentence that beats him is she never took a dime and she never gave an interview. At 2:15 that afternoon, a courier arrived at the offices of Vance and Aldrich with a sealed envelope addressed to Lauren M. Hayes, care of counsel, and Marisol opened it herself and read it twice before she called. "You need to come in." "What is it?" "Come in." Lauren got there at 4:30, still in her work clothes, and Marisol slid a single sheet across the table. It was a copy of a document from the 10th carton released to her as a party in the civil case marked with a production number. An internal memorandum dated 4 weeks after the divorce decree, from Marcus Delaney's office to Ethan Whitmore, copied to Dominic Reyes. Subject line: Hayes Contingency Planning. Lauren read the first paragraph and her ears started ringing. Per your request, we have preliminarily reviewed avenues relating to Eileen Hayes, age 81, currently resident at Ridgeline Memory Care. Note that guardianship of an incapacitated parent may be petitioned by an interested party where the primary caregiver demonstrates financial instability. Should Ms. Hayes' financial circumstances deteriorate as anticipated, a filing on behalf of the foundation as an interested payer is not foreclosed. Lauren set the page down very carefully. Marisol, I know. He wasn't cutting off her care to make me beg. Lauren's voice came out almost conversational, which frightened both of them. He was cutting off her care so I'd be broke, and then he was going to use being broke to take her. That's what the memo contemplates. That's my mother. Lauren stood up. That's a woman who doesn't know what year it is. He was going to have a judge hand her to a foundation with his name on it, and then he'd have owned the only thing on this earth I would have walked back into that marriage for. Marisol didn't say anything. 4 weeks after, Lauren said. 4 weeks after he signed the papers, not during the fight, after, when I was already gone and living over a hardware store and eating rice out of a pot. Lauren, he wasn't finishing the divorce. She looked up, and her face was completely dry, and that was somehow worse than crying. He was starting the next one. Marisol Vance let the silence run for a full 10 seconds before she said anything, because she had learned in 19 years that the sentence you say to a person in that particular minute is the one they quote back to you at trial. Sit down, Lauren. I don't want to sit down. Sit down anyway, because I'm about to tell you something you're going to hate, and I'd rather you were sitting. Lauren sat. That memo is a lawyer's memo, Marisol said. Read the verbs. Preliminarily reviewed, not foreclosed. Every single sentence in there is written by a man who knew it might one day be read by somebody exactly like me. There's no instruction in it. There's no plan. There's a menu. He asked for the menu. Yes, he did. He asked a law firm to look into whether he could take my mother, Lauren said, 4 weeks after the decree. Marisol, I was reconciling invoices for $22 an hour, and he was paying somebody $800 an hour to research guardianship petitions. I know. So what do we do with it? And Marisol Vance said the thing Lauren hated. Nothing, she said. Not yet. Lauren stared at her. Explain that. Because right now, you are the most credible person in this entire matter, Marisol said. You gave a bank a question. You never leaked a page. You never took $1. You stood in his boardroom and told the truth in front of 8 directors, and you didn't raise your voice once. And every institution watching this has spent 6 weeks quietly deciding whether you're a citizen or a scorned wife, and Lauren, that verdict is not in yet. And if I take this to a reporter? If you take this to a reporter, you win a Tuesday, Marisol said. You get one enormous, satisfying, incandescent Tuesday. Every headline in America says billionaire plotted to seize ex-wife's mother, and for about 36 hours, you will feel something close to justice. She leaned forward, and then his lawyers stand up, and they say this is a woman who took a privileged internal memorandum produced in civil discovery and fed it to the press to inflame a jury pool, and they'd be right. And Priya Raghavan, who has been the best thing that's happened to you, would have to sanction you, and she would. Lauren pressed her thumbs into her eyes. So I sit on it. You don't sit on it. That's his word, and I'd like you to never use it about yourself. Marisol tapped the page. You file it, properly, in an amended answer and counterclaim on a docket with a number on it, where a judge reads it and the public record swallows it whole, and it lives there forever. That's slower. It's less satisfying. And it can't be taken away from you. Lauren looked at the page for a long moment. When? 30 days. Status conference. In front of the one judge in America who already told his lawyer out loud on the record what would happen if this woman's mother showed up in another filing. And Lauren Hayes laughed. It came out of her before she could stop at one short, astonished breath. He put it in writing, she said. He put it in writing 4 weeks after the decree, Marisol said. And then 2 weeks ago, his own outside counsel put her in a pleading again. Lauren, I have been doing this since 1996. Nobody ever gets caught doing the thing. They get caught doing it twice. At 8:15 that night, Lauren called Diane and told her about the memo, and her sister was silent so long that Lauren said her name 3 times. Diane, I'm here. Say something. I'm trying to decide whether to tell you the truth. You've never once not told me the truth. Okay. Diane's voice was very low. In August, a woman called me. Said she was from a legal services group doing a wellness review on families with a member in memory care. Asked me who paid and how and whether the payments were current and whether I'd ever had to help. And I answered every question, Lauren. All of them. I sat on my porch for 20 minutes and told a stranger our whole financial situation because she was nice and she said the word wellness. Lauren closed her eyes. That was them. That was them, Diane said, and her voice broke apart. And I told her you were behind. I told her you'd been late in July. I told her I was helping with groceries. I built their case for them on my own porch, and I never even asked for a callback number. Diane, don't. Diane, listen to me. Lauren's voice went hard and warm at the same time. You are a school nurse who answered a phone call from somebody who said the word wellness. That's not a mistake. That's the entire design. They don't call people who are suspicious. They call people who are decent because decent people answer questions. I helped him. You helped me every day for 4 months while he was researching how to take our mother, Lauren said. You want to trade ledgers with me because I lived with him for 12 years and I still didn't see it. Diane was crying now, and Lauren let her. Get in the car, Lauren said. Come over. Bring the bad wine. At 10:20 that same night, 90 miles south, Ethan Whitmore was in an apartment he no longer had a reason to leave in the mornings, and he called Marcus Delaney. You're not my lawyer anymore, he said. That's correct, which is why you shouldn't be calling me. One question, not about the case. Ask it and I'll decide. The Hayes contingency memo. There was a pause, exactly 1 beat too long. I'm going to hang up, Marcus said. Marcus, no. Listen to me because I'm going to give you the last free thing you'll ever get from me, and then I'm going to stop answering. Marcus's voice was tight. I want you to know that I wrote the most defensive memo of my career. Every hedge I could think of. Preliminarily. Not foreclosed. Do you know why? Why? Because I was hoping you'd read it and think it sounded weak and drop it, Marcus said. That's what I did instead of saying no. I wrote you a bad answer and hoped you'd lose interest. That's the whole story of my last 6 years, and it's going to be in a deposition, and my wife is going to read it. Marcus? And Ethan, you didn't lose interest, Marcus said. You called me 11 days later and asked what the filing threshold was in Westchester. I have that call in my time entries, 0.6 of an hour. Good night. Ethan sat in that apartment for a long time. Then he went into this kitchen and stood at a counter where a woman had once read a folder at 11 o'clock at night, and he understood finally and completely that there was no version of the last 4 years. He could tell himself where he came out as a man who had made mistakes. He had made one mistake. In November, 4 years ago. Everything after that had been maintenance. At 6:40 on Monday morning, 412 letters went out from the special committee of Whitmore Global Holdings, and by 9 the phones at Harbor Point Sales were unusable, and by 11 a woman named Adriana Salas, who had signed a purchase contract on Unit 104 for her family and had a 4-year-old registered at the ground floor pre-K, was standing on the sidewalk in front of the building on the local news with the letter in her hand saying she didn't understand any of it except one sentence. The sentence was construction has been suspended pending independent verification of the foundation design. At 11:40, Priscilla Doyle stood in front of the entire company on 37 and did the thing nobody in that building had ever seen a Whitmore executive do, which was answer a question badly and out loud. How long is the pause? Somebody asked. I don't know. Are we selling the asset? I don't know. Are there layoffs? Priscilla Doyle held the room for about 4 seconds. Yes, she said. There are going to be. I don't know the number, and anybody who tells you they do is lying to you. What I can tell you is that when I know you'll know within the hour, and that I'm not going to stand up here and use the word restructuring at you. Somebody in the back said, that's the first honest answer I've heard in this building in 3 years. And the room made a noise, and Priscilla went back to her office and closed the door and put her head in her hands for 90 seconds and then got back to work. At 2 that afternoon, Corbin Hale closed on the Northbridge position at 51 cents on the dollar, and Redgate Partners became the single largest creditor of Harbor Point, and 11 minutes after the wire cleared, he called Lauren Hayes. It's done! Congratulations! Don't do that! I'm not being sarcastic, Lauren said. You stopped a building. You paid $400 million to stop a building. Take the congratulations. I paid $211 to buy 415 of paper on a building that's going to cost another $300 to fix, Corbin said. Lauren, I'm not the hero of this. On a long enough timeline, I make money. That's the thing about all of it. The only person in this entire story who lost money on purpose is you. I didn't lose money on purpose. You had $53,000 and a lawsuit, and you turned down an interview that would have paid you $250,000. Lauren was quiet. How do you know about that? Because they came to me first, Corbin said. They asked if Redgate would encourage you. I said no, and then I hung up and sat there for a minute and felt something I don't feel very often, which is that I'd just done something for free. He cleared his throat. Which brings me to why I called. Corbin, hear the whole thing. Corbin, if this is the job offer, I want you to know I've been dreading it for 6 weeks. Dreading? Yes. That's a hell of a response to a number I haven't said yet. You don't have to say it, and that's exactly the problem. Lauren stood up from her desk in the strip mall office and walked out to the parking lot with the phone. Corbin, you've been extraordinarily decent to me. You funded a defense with no strings, and you put it in a letter your own general counsel called malpractice, and I know exactly what happens if I take a job at Redgate. Tell me. For 2 years, every single time I open my mouth about anything, somebody says, of course she did, she got paid. Her voice was steady. That's it. That's all it takes. It doesn't matter that you'd never ask me to shade anything. It doesn't matter that I'd never do it. The sentence exists, and once it exists, everything I said in that boardroom becomes a job interview I gave in front of 8 directors. Corbin Hale was quiet for a while. You know what the worst part of this business is, he said finally. What? That you're right and that being right about that costs you about $4 million over 10 years. I know what it costs. Do you? Because I've watched a lot of people do the honorable thing at 35 when they had time to recover from it. You're 51. I'm 51, Lauren agreed, and you're going to say no. I'm going to say no. Then can I ask you what you're going to do instead? Because I've got about 90 seconds before somebody comes in here about a wire. Lauren looked across the parking lot at an HVAC company with a hand-painted sign. I'm going to keep reconciling invoices for Patty until this case is over, she said. And then I'm going to hang out a shingle, and I'm going to do one thing, and I'm going to do it for people who can't pay much, which is what? I'm going to read the documents, Lauren said. That's my whole skill, Corbin. 12 years of reading the thing everybody signs and nobody reads. There are boards out there right now with a woman sitting in the second row who knows something's wrong and can't prove it and doesn't have the vocabulary. I was her for 4 years. I'm going to be the phone call she makes. At 4:50 that afternoon, Lauren Hayes' phone rang with a number she recognized and had not answered in 9 weeks. She looked at it for 4 rings. Then she went out to the parking lot again and answered. Hello, Ethan. You picked up. Say what you called to say. I'm not calling about the case. That's not an answer to what I said. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was different than she had ever heard it sanded down. I read the memo, he said. You wrote the memo. Wrote. I asked for it. Marcus wrote it. A breath. Lauren, I've been sitting with this for 4 days, trying to construct a version where I'm not the man in that document, and I can't. That's the first true thing you've said to me in 4 years. I know. So say the rest of it. I don't know what the rest of it is. Yes, you do, Lauren said. Ethan, you called me. That means you rehearsed. You've rehearsed every conversation you've ever had with me. So say the rehearsed part, and then we'll get to the real one. She heard him laugh once, and there was something broken in it. You always did that. I did. 12 years, and I never once got to give a prepared answer. Because I read the file before dinner, Lauren said. That's all that ever was. That's what you married, and that's what you couldn't stand. That's not why. Then say why. And Ethan Whitmore said, because you were never impressed. Lauren stood in a parking lot in a town he'd never heard of, and something in her chest went very quiet. Every person in my life has been impressed with me since I was 29, he said. Gordon, the banks, Dominic, my own mother. And I'd come home and tell you the biggest thing I'd ever done, and you'd say, that's good, did you check the escalation clause? His voice cracked. And I told myself for 12 years that you were withholding, that you were cold, that you didn't understand what I'd built. And you weren't withholding, he said. You were the only person on earth who was actually paying attention to what I was doing instead of what I was. Lauren didn't say anything. That's it, Ethan said. That's the whole thing. That's why I laughed at you in that kitchen. Not because I thought you were stupid, because you weren't, and because if I let you be right about the Meridian letter at 11 o'clock at night in March, then I'd have had to be a man who got told the truth by his wife and did something about it, and I didn't know how to be that. So you kept me. So I kept you. For 4 years knowing I'd read it because I couldn't testify. There was a long silence. Yes, he said, and there it was, out loud from him. Lauren found that her hands were steady, and she noticed it with a kind of distant surprise. Thank you, she said. For what? For saying it, she said. You have no idea what you just did for me. I've spent 9 weeks having other people explain my own marriage to me. Rachel, Walter, my sister, all of them telling me what you were doing, and every one of them right, and every single night I'd lie there and think, but they weren't in the room. Maybe there was something else. Maybe there was 1 year in there that was real. Lauren. And now I don't have to wonder, she said. So thank you. I mean that without 1 drop of poison in it. There was a year that was real. Don't. The third one, Ethan said. Your father died in March, and I flew back from Singapore, and I sat on the bathroom floor with you for 2 nights, and I didn't check my phone once. Lauren, that was real. I'm not asking you for anything. I need one thing in my life to have been real, and I'm asking you not to take that one. Lauren closed her eyes. It was real, she said. He made a sound. It was real, Ethan. That's what makes all the rest of it obscene. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. You were capable of it. That's the part that took me 9 weeks to get through. If you were a monster, the whole way down, this would have been easy. But I sat on a bathroom floor with a man who was good to me for 2 nights, and 11 years later, that same man had a law firm look up guardianship statutes for my mother. I'm going to withdraw everything, he said. That's not up to you anymore. The suit against you, I can withdraw that. I'm still a director, and I'm still the largest shareholder, and I can make that one call. Ethan, Lauren's voice was very gentle, and it was the worst sound he'd ever heard. I don't want it withdrawn. What? I want it litigated, she said. I want to file my answer and my counterclaim in 22 days, and I want the memo attached as Exhibit D, and I want a judge to read it into a public record where it stays forever. Not because I want to hurt you, because there's a woman out there right now, married to a man like you who's going to search a docket in 6 years and find it, and she's going to learn that it happens, and that it has a name and that somebody fought it, and it's written down. Lauren, that's going to destroy what's left of me. I know. And you're going to do it anyway. Yes. There was a long, long silence on the line. Okay, Ethan said. Okay. You said okay to me on a courthouse step in June, he said. I've thought about that word every day for 4 months. I didn't understand it then. I think I understand it now. What do you think it means? It means the conversation's over and the consequences aren't. Lauren stood in that parking lot with the phone against her ear. Goodbye, Ethan. Lauren, yes. Is your mother okay? And Lauren Hayes, who had planned for this call for 9 weeks and had 100 answers ready, found she had nothing prepared for that. She's okay, she said. She had oatmeal. She complained about the cinnamon. Good, Ethan said, and his voice was gone entirely. That's good. She always did. He hung up first. 19 days later, Walter Grant came home from the hospital with a stent, a new list of prohibitions, and a wife who had started answering his phone. Lauren drove up on a Sunday with a coffee cake Diane had made and sat in a living room that smelled like 41 years of the same house. You look better, she said. I look like a man who's been told he can't have salt. He can have salt, Ruth said from the kitchen. He can have a 1/4 teaspoon, and he acts like it's a hostage situation. Walter waved a hand at the sound. Sit down. Tell me the real thing, not the lawyer version. Lauren told him. The borings, the letters to 412 families, the resignation, the memo. Walter listened with his eyes closed, and when she got to the memo, he opened them. Say the date again. 4 weeks after the decree. Huh. He was quiet a moment. Lauren, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to let me finish because Ruth says I'm not allowed to get excited. Go ahead. I've spent 3 years believing the worst thing I ever did was keep quiet about a soil report, he said. And when I drove those boxes down there at 4 a.m, I thought that was me squaring it. Even trade. 3 years of cowardice, 1 hour of nerve. Walter, let me finish. He shifted. And then I had a heart attack, and I laid in a bed for 11 days with nothing to do, and I finally understood that I had the whole thing backwards. That report was never the worst thing. The worst thing was that in 9 years of watching that man, I never once said anything to you. Lauren stopped with the coffee cup halfway up. To me, you'd come to those Christmas parties, Walter said, and I'd watch him talk over you, and I'd watch you let him, and I'd think that's a marriage that's not my business, and every year I'd think it a little less convincingly. His hands were shaking now. I knew what he was in a boardroom, Lauren. I'm the only person who was in every one of those rooms for 9 years, and I never once found a quiet moment and said, hey, I don't know what he's like at home, but I know what he's like at work, and I'd hate for you not to know. That wasn't your job. That's the sentence, Walter said. That's the exact sentence. That's the one I said to myself for 9 years. And it's the one everybody says. And it's how a man like that gets 12 years. He looked at her. The banks didn't fail here. The board didn't fail here. 60 people who knew and said nothing failed here, and I was the senior one. Lauren sat with that for a while. Walter, can I tell you what I've decided to do? Please. I'm going to be the person somebody calls, she said. Not a whistleblower service, not a hotline, a person, somebody who reads the thing they can't understand and tells them the truth in a kitchen. Walter Grant was quiet a long moment, and then he did something that made Ruth stop in the doorway with a plate in her hand. He started to cry. That's the phone call I needed in November, he said. That's the whole thing. That's exactly the phone call I needed. 13 months later, Lauren Hayes stood in a hallway outside a ballroom in Chicago, holding a bottle of water and waiting to be introduced. Behind the stage door, a young woman with a clipboard and a headset was reading her the introduction to confirm it. Okay, so I've got Lauren Hayes, financial strategy consultant and corporate ethics advisor whose work in the Harbor Point matter has become a case study in Take That Out. The young woman looked up. Which part? The Harbor Point part. But that's why they booked you. I know, Lauren said. Take it out anyway. Ms. Hayes, I have to have something. Lauren thought about it. Say that I read documents for a living, she said. Say that I spent 12 years reading them for free, and now I read them for people who can't afford a firm. That's true, and it's the only part that's mine. The clipboard girl looked at her for a second, and then something in her face changed, and she said, Can I ask you something off the record? Sure. I work for a company, she said very fast, like she'd been holding it. And there's a thing in the contracts, and I've asked twice, and both times they said it's above my pay grade. Lauren set down her water bottle. What's your name? Kayla. Kayla, do you have a pen? Yeah. Lauren gave her a phone number, and then she said the sentence she'd say 400 times over the next few years to 400 different people in 400 hallways. Send me the paragraph, not the whole thing, just the paragraph that made you uncomfortable. I'll tell you in one email whether you're crazy. And then they called her name, and she walked out onto a stage in front of 1,100 people, and she talked for 40 minutes about completion guarantees, and about the difference between confidence and competence, and about the specific way that a company teaches 60 smart people to say, "That's not my job." She never said Ethan Whitmore's name. She didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew. And when a man in the fourth row stood up during the questions and said, Ms. Hayes, a lot of people would call what you did revenge. The ballroom went absolutely still. Lauren considered it. I understand why, she said. And I've thought about it more than you have, so let me be exact. Revenge would have been calling a reporter in June. I had a folder in a storage unit and $400, and a man had just frozen my accounts in a courthouse hallway, and I could have burned him down in a weekend and gotten a very sympathetic profile out of it. What I did instead was ask a lender to confirm which entity held a completion guarantee. That's it. That's the whole act. A bank asked a question it had a right to ask, and my ex-husband's company could not survive the answer. So here's my exact answer to you, sir. If asking a true question in the right forum destroys a company, the question didn't destroy it. The lie did. And the only reason people call that revenge is that the person asking used to be married to him. The man sat down, and a woman near the back stood up and asked the question Lauren had actually come there to answer. Ms. Hayes, what happened to the building? Lauren smiled. They fixed it, she said. It cost $340 million and 26 months, and it opened in April. 412 units. The pre-K on the ground floor has 91 kids in it. And every one of those families got a letter on a Monday telling them the truth before anybody was legally required to. She let that sit. That's the answer, by the way, to all of it. People keep asking me how the story ends, and they want it to end with a man losing an empire because that's a satisfying shape and we all like it. She looked out at the room. But that building is the ending. Somebody's kid is going to be in a fourth-floor apartment in that building in the year 2060, and the doors are going to close right, and nobody's ever going to know why. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's what all of it was for. 2 weeks after Chicago on a Tuesday, Lauren got a letter. Not an email. A letter forwarded twice in handwriting she'd known for 16 years. It was one page. Lauren, I'm not asking for a response, and I'd prefer you didn't send one. 3 things, and then I'll leave you alone permanently. The first is that I signed the consent order in March. Officer and director bar 5 years. I'm told I'm lucky. I've stopped arguing with people who tell me that. The second is that Nadine let me take Delia to the aquarium in June. 4 hours. She's 5 now. She asked me what I do, and I told her I used to build buildings and now I don't. And she said that's sad, and I said yes it is, and she held my hand in the tunnel with the sharks. I have thought about that more than I have thought about the $2.1 billion. The third is the one I have been trying to write for a year. You said on the phone that there was 1 year that was real, and you let me have it, and I want you to know that I understand what that cost you and that I have not spent it cheaply. I think about it when I want to feel sorry for myself, and I make myself stop because it wasn't given to me for that. I don't have a request. I know that's unusual for me. I'm just telling you that a man who spent 12 years needing to be the smartest person in every room he entered eventually walked into an aquarium and let a 5-year-old explain sharks to him. Ethan. Lauren read it twice standing in her kitchen, her own kitchen in a small house she'd bought with her own money 40 minutes from Ridgeline. Then she folded it and put it in the drawer with the utility bills because that was the correct drawer. She did not answer it, not because she was cruel, because she had learned at 51 years old in a walk-up above a hardware store with $407 and a bus schedule taped to a refrigerator that not every sentence requires a reply. Her mother died the following spring in the room with the window she knew with both daughters holding a hand. Lauren Hayes was there at 3 a.m, and she did not think about Ethan Whitmore once. 3 years after a man froze his wife's accounts in a courthouse hallway to make her flinch, Lauren Hayes had 11 clients, a house, a used car she'd paid cash for, and a phone that rang at odd hours with frightened people on the other end of it. She never got rich. She never gave an interview. She never took a dime from anybody who stood to gain from what she knew. And the last thing anybody should understand about this story is not that a woman brought down a $2 billion empire, because that isn't what happened. A man built something on a lie, and it fell exactly on schedule, the way lies do. What Lauren Hayes did was refuse one single time on the worst day of her life to carry it for him 1 day longer. He froze the accounts he could reach. She was already free.